Welcome to the Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, July 25th. My name is Chris Lynch. I call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome and thank those in the public and those on TV for taking an interest in our district business. I'd like to start tonight by introducing those at the table with me tonight. To my right is Superintendent Steve Murley, then Directors Lori Rotland, Phil Hemingway, Brian Kersling, Paul Rosler, Chris Liebig, and then Recording Secretaries Kim Colvin and trainee tonight, Kristen Peterson. So Kristen's going to run the meeting, and Kim will train her as we go, so just for your information. The public is reminded if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in during community comments. Persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment of the agenda. And the first item on the agenda tonight is community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. Reminded to give your name, address, the topic you wish to speak. During community comments, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. Initial community comment shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. To the extent you are commenting on items not on our posted agenda, the board may ask follow-up questions of speakers, but is prohibited by Iowa open meeting law from responding to questions from speakers or engaging in substantive discussions regarding non-agenda items. And I think the first two tonight are going to talk on behalf of the Equity Committee, so Yolanda Rivera and Charlie Eastman. And on deck will be Caroline Dieterle.
Good evening. My name is Yolanda Rivera, and I'm the chair of the Equity Committee. I'm here with a couple of the members of our committee, and Charlie Eastman is with us, and we're going to speak to you tonight on behalf of the committee. It has been quite a year with regard to equity issues in our district. The ICCSD Equity Committee met and continues to meet every month for about 2 to 3 hours each time. Plus, we held a special meeting on a Saturday in April. We have found ourselves deliberating the hot button issues that have arisen throughout the course of the year that have taken a great deal of your time and attention as well. In the process, we have recognized that we sometimes run out of time to stay on top of the longer-term strategic work in the district. To address this, we are now building our meeting agendas and deliberations around the comprehensive equity plan that you have all approved. In that vein, one of the major issues that we have been addressing is the need for measures of progress across the components of the equity plan. We are pleased to have had 2 very substantive discussions this year with Diane Schumacher about the second and third administration of the FAST assessment, as well as the FAST data, as well as how the FAST data might help the district analyze the impact of the RAM model. It is this agenda item that I wish to address with you tonight. As a committee, we are still deliberating the appropriate use of FAST data, as well as additional data that could and should be used to evaluate the effectiveness of district interventions such as RAM. I think it is safe to say that we find that FAST data to be extremely important and complicated. We discussed the FAST data with and without Diane Schumacher 2 weeks ago, and we realized that we need to know more about the statistical significance of the findings, as well as more about whether the way we are looking into the FAST data model is as an indicator of the effectiveness of RAM is appropriate. We also discussed some of the unintended consequences of having too much reliance on FAST data. In the end, though, we all agreed that disaggregated FAST data is critically important, and we are very pleased with the administration's, and in particular with Diane's willingness to share the data as quickly as she did. We urge you to continue to always ask for disaggregated data. We were a little bit split on how to interpret the RAM data. If the difference between the RAM1 and the RAM3 schools are statistically significant, then it certainly seems to demonstrate some level of effectiveness of the RAM model. Overall, however, we all agreed that the level of reading proficiency among African American students is unacceptable and requires urgency of purpose and deliberate interventions. We therefore recommend that you ask questions of the administration, such as, What level of improvement should we have expected through RAM investment? What is an ambitious but reasonable level of improvement? What level of improvement should we expect for the next year? What interventions, in addition to RAM, are being implemented to achieve racial equity in students' experiences and outcomes? In other words, how are you planning to accelerate the effectiveness of the district supports to students of colors, even more than we have that may have been evident this year?
Again, my name is Charlie Eastham, I'm a member of the Equity Committee. Just want to point out that actually we made a copy of what we're reading from available to you before the meeting, and I think you received an email message with the contents too. I want to continue our statement. In addition, as you look at FAST data as a potential way to evaluate the effectiveness of RAM, we believe you should ask additional questions, such as, one, what level of growth occurred among some subgroups in RAM 1 schools? Currently, we only have status data to analyze for this percent proficient, not proficient, which is just a sliver of the available data from the FAST assessment. Recognizing that the administration may not have all of the FAST data from the vendor this year, we urge you to think carefully about what data to look at this coming year. For example, we are interested in what is happening to more students than those just on the bubble, that is, those students that are close to being proficient but not quite there. We ask that you consider asking the administration what additional questions should we be asking of the FAST data, and what supports do we need as a district to do this level of data analysis. The second area we ask you to consider is what other data should the district, schools, and our teachers be looking at, and how can the school board support that work? Again, we want to be clear that the questions we are all asking are complicated and usually require more nuanced conversations than either you have time at board meetings at the board table, and even then we have the Equity Committee time at our own meetings. If this is a priority, though, your administrators can and should have very nuanced conversations about these data. We have seen them do it with us, and we trust that it is a priority of the district and that they will step forward to continue this work. We also want to be transparent in that we believe there is more that the district can be doing to support implementation of the Comprehensive Equity Plan overall. We see this as a work in progress, though, and we feel strongly that having these discussions is critical. We applaud you for engaging in the work and therefore stand in support of your discussions tonight. Thank you for asking questions about the effectiveness of the programs you have approved and for paying particular attention to achieving equitable outcomes. We urge you to deepen your long-term strategic work on equity in the coming year. We look forward to continue to support you and the administration as you ask more and more nuanced questions of the data and take more and more systemic approaches to impacting outcomes and experience for students. Thank you.
Thanks, Yolanda, and thanks, Charlie. Caroline, then next up will be Mary Bontrager.
Oh, well, I won't take much of your time. I was told some time ago, this past week, that there would be an item on the agenda regarding the achievement by Superintendent Murley of his PhD degree. And I don't see that item on the agenda. I wondered whether that is going to be addressed at some other point.
We don't engage in discussion with the community, but we're happy to talk that in agenda setting.
Pardon?
We don't engage in conversation during community comment.
Oh, you don't? Okay, well, is it, can Superintendent Murley answer questions, or
No.
No? Well, that seems like a strange way to run a board.
It's
but
based on Iowa open meetings laws. So there's what things we can do or can't do based on what's on the agenda.
Okay, well, I am looking eagerly to see what is presented about that, and I'm hoping that it will indeed be included on an upcoming agenda fairly soon. My understanding was, from looking at Superintendent Murley's contract, that there's a $6,000 bonus that will be accrued by him if he finishes this degree. And so therefore I'm interested to know what the granting institution will be, whether he is indeed still involved in this endeavor, and what the subject of his thesis is, his area of research. I'm a little curious about that because I understand that he has given presentations to the Supes Academy regarding political mapping, and I'm wondering whether that's his area for his thesis. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Mary? And on deck will be Kiev Mustafa. Mustafa. Probably saying that wrong, but.
Hello, my name is Mary Bontrager, and I live at 1113 Pink Ridge Drive. I am here to voice my support for the upcoming bond September 12th. My experience in the community includes having 3 now grown children who attended Horn, Northwest, and West High. I taught at Lincoln Elementary, and I also taught at Horace Mann Elementary. I was an assistant principal at Wood Elementary, and I had the honor of being the principal of my beloved Mark Twain Elementary for 8 years. I have now retired, but I work part-time as well as volunteer in the community, so I'm here wearing lots of hats tonight. I support the bond 100% because the bond will help fund the remaining improvements to our facilities that were laid out in the facilities master plan. I remember when this plan was first presented, and it was like I was looking at a masterpiece. From my experience, I knew that so many of our buildings were in dire need of improvements, and finally, we had a long-range strategic plan to address these needs. This plan wasn't some nilly-willy plan that the board and administrators created with no input from experts. Schools were examined in detail, and input was gathered from the folks who were working in the buildings. We were very fortunate at Mark Twain to be one of the first designated buildings for improvements to be made, and I want to share you a little bit of that experience. Our plan included air conditioning, a gym, music room, an art room, renovated kindergarten rooms, and additional spaces for our counselor and our family advocate. During the project, we had the philosophy that whoever sweeps the floor should choose the broom. So we immediately created a committee to decide each and every step along the way. I cannot tell you how much impact these improvements had on our building. We saw improvements in learning, we saw improvements in behavior, and we saw, of course, such a boost in our morale in our students and our staff. No more 95 to 100 degree classrooms. We had that often. No longer trying to make 50 PE classes work around a space that was also used for breakfast, lunch, and after-school program. And I remember my music teacher coming to me and saying, she used to teach in a portable, saying to me, Mary, my job has literally changed from managing children to teaching children music. So you might ask, why am I here, my beloved Twain's beautiful space for learning? Well, I want to truly believe we're not a community who only cares about what affects us personally, but truly cares about all kids in the district. Don't all of our students deserve a safe, accessible, comfortable space to learn? I've heard folks argue against this bond for reasons that puzzle me. I've heard that the plan is too vague and they don't trust the administrators to make good decisions down the road. I've heard the referendum is too tight and it doesn't allow flexibility. So my goal tonight is to hopefully refocus the community conversation about what this bond is really about. It's not about seclusion rooms, it's not about special ed changes, it's not even about whether you like the board or not, or the administrators or not. This board is about making building improvements that are long overdue in our schools to enhance learning. So I don't want anyone to be distracted. I ask you to learn about the facilities master plan, what it proposes to do, and I ask you to vote yes September 12th. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Kev? The next up will be Jane Finch.
Mr. President, it's Kaveh Mostafavi.
Is that
You were
right?
close. I'm used to it. I am an Iowa City resident. I live at 3541 Galway Court, and I am the founder and CEO of EcoCare Supply. As a former West High Trojan, I'm an extremely competitive person who has learned to never go down without a fight. I'm here to discuss agenda item number 18, which is the custodial RFP. Mr. McKenzie made the right decision financially by selecting an out-of-state big corporation. However, I believe that EcoCare Supply, by being a local company and who every member of the organization has attended the Iowa City Community School District, if there's an opportunity to have a discussion without any disrespect to Mr. McKenzie's decision, because he did make the right one based on finances, we have a lot of value adds that we offer to our clients. A few of our clients, City of Iowa City, we were awarded RFP for them. City of North Liberty, we do most of their buildings. I'm not here, again, to disrespect the process, the agenda, or Mr. McKenzie's decision. I'm merely here to advocate for my organization that is an Iowa company founded in this community and supported by this community. As I said, every member grew up in this community and attended these schools. My major objective in moving back to Iowa to start EcoCare Supply was to create jobs. And in the 3 years since our inception, we have created 10 jobs. Why I am so extremely, I'm the only one to blame for this because I'm the one that drafted this proposal to submit. And I think I miscalculated the financial output that I gave to Mr. McKenzie, and I take full responsibility for that. And that is not the point of discussion here. The point of discussion, I hope, would be there's an opportunity to support a local company that has individuals in it that all attended the school district, and that does work just like this RFP in this community. And all I ask is to have a discussion about that. I know the chances of Mr. McKenzie's decision being overturned or us getting an opportunity to win this is slim to none. But I believe having a discussion of what EcoCare could provide to this community, to the district, and to this community would be beneficial for that 20, 30 minutes that we could have that conversation. So again, I stand before you with all due respect. Blame it on West High School because I just can't. We lost fair and square. I told Mr. McKenzie I priced us out of the ball game, but I'm a West High Trojan. I got to put up a fight, and if at the end of this we still lost, then we gave it our best, and that's all we can ask for. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, and go Trojans.
Just, if you could just clarify for a second, did you say that your business is located in North Liberty, or?
It's in Coralville. I couldn't find warehouse in Iowa City, unfortunately.
Okay, but it's within the district, and
Correct.
you pay local taxes and will be affected by the
Correct.
bond.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jane Finch, and on deck will be Heather Bright.
Hi, my name is Jane Finch. I'm a parent within the district. I'm here to talk about the digital citizenship curriculum and share a personal story and to offer a word of thanks. First off, by thanking all of you for serving on the board and for listening to my story. At the end of October, we bought our 13-year-old son his first cell phone. Our reasoning, ironically, was for his safety, to facilitate communication in the midst of all of his after-school activities. It took less than 2 weeks for him to receive his first harassing text message calling him a terrorist, which was a dig on his last name and his father's country of origin. My son and I both asked the student, whom I knew to be a friend of his, to stop and explain to him that his joke wasn't funny. I thought that was the end of it, but instead of ending, it only escalated, and over time became almost a daily occurrence at school and online for another 5 months before we were made aware. Worried about pushback and not fitting in, our son didn't tell us about any of it. The tricky part of all of this is that the comments originated from a group of boys who had known our son for many years. They were his friends, and they thought they were being smart, clever, and edgy. They were emboldened by the pack mentality and the current political climate and desensitized by popular culture. Kids these days. Bullying comes in many varieties, and the negative effects are well known, but probably not really truly understood until you experience the pain and consequences it brings upon your own child, which are beyond anything we could have imagined. But we are not angry with these students. I do not think any of these boys knew how damaging their comments were to my son's self-esteem. I don't think they understood at all that they were engaging in bullying behavior, and I'm certain none of them realized their actions constituted harassment. It is the whole point of having a childhood that you make mistakes like these and learn from them. We are grateful that our concerns on this matter were taken seriously when we brought them to the district's equity director, Kingsley Botchway. He listened, he acted, and he even incorporated some of our suggestions into the new cyber citizenship curriculum. He also broadened its scope based upon our son's experience. We're also appreciative of Assistant Superintendent Matt Degner's involvement and the involvement of Phil Hemingway and Chris Liebig. Phil especially championed this cause for us. What all of these people have in common is that they cared. They listened and they practiced empathy, which just happens to be the key component to taking on bullying. We are pleased to see the plans for the cyber citizenship curriculum and the steps being taken to mitigate the bullying issue, and we hope to continue working with the district on this issue and checking in on them from time to time. This education component at the ground level is very important. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking that bullying is a student issue. It is not. This is a society problem. Children learn from modeling the adults around them. To truly take on the bullying problem means practicing empathy. Practicing empathy from the top down. It means asking questions and then listening to the answers. It means practicing integrity. It means favoring restorative justice practices over punitive measures and retaliation. Be the adult you want your child to grow up to be. This has always been my husband and I's parenting mantra. And while I will be the first to admit that we are far from perfect at this, it is how we try to live our lives.
Thanks.
With
Thanks, Jane.
compassion, accountability, and for our words and actions, and most importantly, with integrity. My husband and I have experienced
Jane,
for ourselves.
Jane, I need to stop you there.
Okay.
It's just, thank you very much for your comments.
I just wanted to say that.
Jane, I need to stop you there. I do, because.
Thank you for the opportunity. I thought I had it under 4. I'm sorry. I practiced.
No problem.
Okay.
It's just
Can you please email the comments to us? The board@iowacitieschools.org.
I will.
Thank you.
I have
Or
one more
you can
sentence.
just give
Yep.
give your prepared statement to
Okay.
Kim, and she can.
I will email it.
That'd be
Thank
great,
you.
Jane.
All right.
Thank you. Heather? And just so we're clear administratively, it's just a consistency thing. People to people, we need to keep it consistent, so. On deck will be Will Cargill Bernhardt. Go ahead, Heather.
Hi, Heather Bright, Shimmick parent, playground co-chair, one more time. Just coming tonight to talk to you about the consent agenda item number 15, the additional contract that's being up for discussion tonight, because I'm sure it'll be up for discussion again. There is an additional amount of money that's being put forth tonight based on some discussion about additional ADA components that are being added and things being changed, the kahuna being moved, a ramp being added. I wanted to, again, advocate for these changes. I think they're great changes. I think that they're a step in the right direction. Do we have $1 million for this project? No. Is this a step in the right direction and a move towards something better? Yes, I think it is. Does it go in line with what the Shimmick Playground Committee discussed? Yes, it does. The one thing I did want to say is there was another small meeting held on June 28th with myself, Dwayne, Ben, Kingsley, Tony, and I'm going to murder his last name. Yes, and Jenny Medemeyer and Melissa. Krishnan, and they wanted to discuss some additional play panels to be added. At that meeting, they discussed the play panels they wanted. We also, at that meeting, they requested a tree climber get removed and a staircase get put in its place, and the physical plant conceded to that. And the ramp is staying. A lot of the changes have stayed in place, but there actually was one additional modification made, which was to remove a tree climber thing off of part of one of the 3-foot high platform, and a staircase put in place. And that staircase was actually so that the para for individuals that are in wheelchairs could be right there to get the individual off of the slide and right back up, or so that they could get right to them and not have to go all the way down the ramp. So I thought it was a move in the good direction. It did remove a piece of climbing equipment that the other children could have used, but, it once more, I felt went more in the direction of ADA compliance, and I thought it was a good thing. But I did want to just come tonight, because I know this is on the agenda again, and it's always a heated thing, and I just wanted to advocate that I think we're going in the right direction. I just went to the playground tonight at about 4 o'clock, and was looking at it. It is like that far from being finished, except for the additional parts that have been ordered, which is part of this stuff. So we're this close, people. We're this close. So I hope you consider strongly to move this forward at this point. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Will? On deck will be Nancy Bird.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Will Coghill-Behrens. I live at 423 Elmridge Avenue. I'm Phil's neighbor. I am coming to talk to you tonight as both a teacher in the school district, as a parent in the school district, and as a community member. Tonight, you'll be hearing the results of a Public Policy Center report on the experiences of LGBTQ students in the school district. 24 years ago, when I came out in high school, things were like this, and we have made a ton of progress, over the last couple of decades on policy, on law, on legitimization of identities within our schools, but it seems to not necessarily be the case here in Iowa City still. And I think that this is an alarming project. The results are alarming, and I'm just here to ask that you really strongly consider the results and the recommendations. There's a lot of momentum in the community right now to do some positive work in this regard, and I hope that we will move it in the right direction, okay?
Thanks, Will. Nancy?
Good evening. My name is Nancy Bird. I'm wearing a couple of hats tonight. One is a parent. I have 3 children in the schools here in Iowa City. I've had 3 children in the Coralville school system as well, so we're really enjoying schools here in Iowa. I've been in this town for about 5 years now, and one of the things that drove my husband and I back to Iowa City, I'm a native of Washington, Iowa, but we decided to locate here in Iowa City primarily because we had a good job and also great schools. In Seattle, where I was last from, it's an amazing city, and we miss it often, but the schools there were in disrepair. The leadership was really probably the most challenged. It wasn't a lack of resources, it was a matter of lack of leadership. So I really wanted to commend you all. I know that these decisions that you're making are always challenging, and when you get between a parent and their student, look out. But I really appreciate the work that you are doing, and I'm here tonight to really advocate and demonstrate my support for the GO bond and its passing, and how important to follow through on that master plan for the facilities, and that we can do it in a very civil way. The amount of work that has been done, and I've participated in a number of those meetings as a parent over the past couple of years, has been extraordinary. The thousands of hours that parents have come to really participate in this planning process. To me, being a former planner in my previous career, has really highlighted the fact of how complex this is, the planning process, how many moving parts there are, how challenging it is for most people to understand even the funding of how schools work. So having a solid plan in place that's moving forward is really important, and I hope that everyone here and out there in the public can really appreciate that and support it by voting for the bond. The other thing that I was going to mention on behalf of the Iowa City Downtown District, I'm the executive director there. We don't have a formal adoption of this process, but I will say in our own board meetings we've discussed the importance of keeping our neighborhood schools around downtown strong. I'm concerned that if this bond doesn't pass, there's a step backwards whereby we have to make those decisions all over again when you have a really strong plan in place now to move forward. So with that, I'll thank you for your time and your service to our community. I know these are incredibly difficult decisions, but I hope you take these comments into consideration and all of you to support the passing of the GO bond. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. That's it for community comment. Next item on the agenda is the business consent agenda.
I'd like to pull number 19 to talk more about it.
19 is expansion, Penn?
Yep, I'd like to discuss that too, and I also like to pull 5, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Okay, so I lost track, so 5.
5, 7, 8, 10, then 12 through 19.
12 through 19, and Lori, I think you...
And the HVAC 16 and 17 could be taken together.
Yeah, number 6, please. Thank you.
So I think that leaves 1 to 4, 9, and 11. Might be simpler to do that way. I'd entertain a motion to approve the business, let's put it this way, I entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items number 1 to 4, 9, and 11.
So moved.
Second.
How are the bills?
Yes, Brian went through it, I went through it. There was $6,071,000 worth of disbursements. I know we're not supposed to discuss personnel matters as it can be evaluatory, but that being said, there were some concerning things in there for me, and I will vote no on the consent agenda.
All right, further discussion?
All the bills were in order by my examination. Any questions I had were answered appropriately and adequately.
All right, Kristen, ready to vote? It's going to be hard for me not to say Kim, so Kristen.
You can call me Kim. Online voting is open. I don't have one from you yet. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, next item on the agenda is legislative priorities, and this has come from work session through the Policy and Governance Committee. Brian, do you want to take this one?
Yep. So over the last 4 years, we've generally set between 2 and 4 legislative priorities to work on when we visit with our legislators, both those that are representative of our area and also across the state. We do have opportunities when we lobby in Des Moines to bend the ear of others from outside of Johnson County, which is nice.
Yes, sorry for interrupting, but Steve, could we bring these up on the screen, or somebody? Sorry.
That's fine. So, as you may recall, we started in policy and governance with some ideas for our legislative priorities. We wanted to focus on 4. We brought them to the board for preliminary discussion. We do need to submit these by the end of July. So, based on the board discussion, I tried to exemplify that and put the words to paper. So. The first priority, of course, and this is every year, is supplemental state aid must be adequate and timely. Iowa law says that supplemental state aid is supposed to be set first before all other budget priorities, and as we all know, that has not been done, and education becomes a political football. So we are asking again that that our legislators set education funding early, within the first month after the governor presents the budget for the year. Second to that, I wanted to encapsulate how important it is for a district like ours, which is growing so very rapidly, that we are able to plan accordingly in a timely manner. We can't do that unless funding is approved in the way that it's supposed to be. The second thing is to extend the SAVE penny tax beyond 2029. The revenue from the SAVE penny tax has funded the first 4 years of the facility master plan here. It's been critical to all the projects that we've done up until this point. And having that extended out beyond 2029 is incredibly important for all school districts across the state. In looking at this, if I was to add anything, now that I look at it after the fact, it would be what we said last year, which is make sure the whole penny comes to education and does not get divvied up to other priorities. The third thing is to fully fund 4-year-old preschool instruction for qualifying students. I threw the tagline in, children never get a second chance at a good start, and students that complete preschool are better prepared to become successful students. It is important. We see positive gains, and I know that we've had discussions up here and we've looked at it in our education committee, but incredibly positive gains from getting preschool for kids who normally would come to kindergarten without preschool, or frequently come to kindergarten without preschool. And then the fourth thing is to to support English language learner students. We want to extend weighted English language learner funding from 5 years to 7 years per pupil in accordance with evidence-based practice. The ICCSD has seen a 300% increase, although I think it's actually a 400% increase in ELL students over the past 4 years, and is now home to nearly 1,400 ELL students. This one, a lot of the initial language is actually exactly in line with Des Moines' language on English language learners. So we want to make sure that we are unified with them and that our message is strong when it comes to the storm the Capitol days on the Hill that we have. So happy to take any suggestions, but I think that we're a little bit under the gun in getting these submitted. There may be some additions or comments or deletions.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think what we're looking for tonight is the overall intent, right? We can continue to wordsmith it if we want to, but we do need to submit the core concepts for consideration at the Iowa Association of School Board. Chris?
Okay, I'm definitely going to vote for this, and I understand that, yes, time is of the essence, and that we're sort of functioning within the narrow confines of what might, we hope, even be realistic, might not even be realistic, I don't know. But I just didn't want the occasion to go by without saying, if you can pull back from the big picture, what would be great for education would be real support for the poor and the working class, and there's a lot of overlap there. Real social programs, yes, pre-K, family leave, the whole package. Collective bargaining, to strengthen collective bargaining. I know we look at it and say, it costs us money, but in the big picture, collective bargaining helps people stay out of poverty. It would be a wonderful thing for education if those could be realistic priorities, and I know they can't be for purposes of this, but I didn't want to let that go by. And also, when it comes to extend the SAVE penny tax, it's just a funny position to be in there rooting for the sales tax, because it's not the most, it's a regressive tax. And, it would be wonderful to have some progressive taxation too. I know we can't put those things in there, but I just didn't want to not say anything.
And I'd like to, and I don't dispute what we've selected there, but to encourage pre-apprenticeship and career and technical education as much as possible at the state level, and make that a priority.
For future legislative priorities?
Yes. Yeah. If we can work that in a way.
So I just want to add, I know it's always a challenge to boil it down to 2 or 3, or went for 4 this year, but I just wanted to reiterate a few things. There's very strong linkage to our strategic plan, and just to make a few comments on making these things kind of real. So, sufficient and timely state aid pretty much directly goes to class size for us. If, you know, if funding is at or above inflation, then our class sizes stay neutral to get smaller. And anytime we lag inflation, class sizes get bigger. So number one is really about class size. I just want to make that abundantly clear. I think extend the penny tax is very clear. It's been tremendous opportunity for SAVE, and every district in Iowa virtually now is asking for an extension because we are in the borrowing window. And I know 12 years seems like a long ways away, but it's not when you're looking at 15 or 20-year bonds. So it's a huge deal across the state. Preschool, as you said, Brian, I mean, we've seen tremendous results for kids. It doesn't matter if they came to our preschool or any preschool, but kids that went to preschool, it's easier for us to track the kids that came with us, but tremendous benefit in getting a good start. And when we talked to the equity committee and our equity plan and part of our student achievement action plan, that's definitely part of it, is getting our students off to the best start, you know, we possibly can, and that's why it speaks to that. ELL, like you said, I mean, it wasn't 5-6 years ago, it was 250 kids. Now it's over 1,300 going on to 1,400, and I think it's just it's a huge part of our opportunity, and it's where our proficiencies are lower, and I think anything we can do there is a tremendous advantage. And then I'm just going to say all this in funding, whenever you support education, right, $1 in education today saves you $3 or $4 in the future, whether it's through social supports or legal involvement or, you know, all the downsides of not having a good education. So I think as we invest, it's obviously it's good for our kids, but it's really our future in Iowa. So anyway, I just wanted to make a few of those things a little more practical and what it kind of means to us. So, I mean, I fully support all four, and there's more that could be added, but this is probably focused on something we can actually advocate and hopefully get some movement on. I entertain a motion.
I move that we approve submitting the 4 legislative priorities to the IASB and the state.
Is there a second? Second. Is there further discussion? Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast with the motion carrying, and all directors voting in favor.
Can I say one thing before you move on? I'd just like to say that this is my 4th year of helping penning from scratch the legislative priorities, and I really appreciate the collaborative effort that has been put forth at both the committee level and at the work session, so on and so forth, before bringing it here. It's very different than in year 1, where one person would write the priorities and then get holes poked in it here at the board table. So I appreciate that. And it's been a lot easier to do as a collaborative effort with all people up here at the table involved in it.
And Kim, I know you're going to do this already, but you'll submit these to the IASB? Yes. Yes, thank you, as usual. Further discussion?
Kim, as long as it doesn't mean that we're standing. Thanks.
All right, moving on to teaching and learning. Next item on the agenda is the digital citizenship. Steve and Matt.
Minimize that. That's on there, yep.
Okay, Kingsley had planned to share this with you this evening, but he got pulled into AVID training at the last minute. We had an administrator that wasn't able to attend, so he accompanied the team to that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of our plans to continue this work with our students surrounding social media and issues we've seen with harassment on social media, and just the education component we think is necessary to go along with that. Probably of prime importance, knowing that we're starting that mass student device initiative this year as well. But we really see that as an opportunity to continue the education part of this and foster these conversations with our students. So there's 2 attachments under this board item. One of them includes the sample presentation that Kingsley's already started delivering with our prep program students as they enter our junior highs and high schools. And then this presentation just talks about some informational points and then kind of a summary of some of the work we plan to engage in. So cyberbullying and online harassment, kind of by the numbers, there's some statistics that he included here. Young adults across the nation are most at risk. And when you look at brain research, brain science, we know a lot of that, just like their decision making, is just because their brains aren't fully developed yet. And this is an element where they, expose that a little bit. So 65% have been the target of at least one element of harassment. 87% have witnessed cyberbullying. 7 in 10 felt that bullying negatively impacted their social lives, and 83% felt the victims felt that the bullying hurt their self-esteem. So we know that it's affecting our kids, and we're not unique in Iowa City that this isn't an issue like it isn't across the rest of the nation. We know that our students are experiencing this, and that there's something that we can actively do to address it. Almost 1 in 4 kids report that they do not know what to do if they should be harassed online, and that's something we think we can easily attack, that if they are harassed online, what are their avenues and what are their channels to go about doing that. So preventative measures for us that we think to start to dig into changing some of those statistics are to foster discussions within our homerooms. As the community commenter pointed out, one of the big gaps here is the empathy component. When it happens behind a screen, you're not seeing that person's reaction. You're not having to be face-to-face having that conversation with the student. So first of all, we need to start with the conversation and that education piece of the students about what this does make people feel, and some of the circumstances that they're putting their peers under, or circumstances they felt themselves. Our cell phone policy, trying to be consistent in our approach to that. The teachers are consistent, our administrators are consistent in addressing that and monitoring that usage for educational appropriate uses. Additional training for students and staff, each building during the academic year. So not only do we have to educate our students about this is a continual conversation with our staff about these conversations too, that if they witness something like this, that they can be the first line of defense to have those conversations with students and be an outlet for somebody to report something that may be concerning happening to them or a friend. Presentation on digital citizenship in the district's complaint process to the incoming 7th and 9th graders during orientation. I hadn't planned to walk you through that whole presentation, but you can pull it up there and you can see that Kingsley highlights exactly where those forms are, who they can go to help them through that process, because we know a kid's not just going to go online, print out a form and do that. They just need to know, how do I connect to an adult that can help me through this process, or a trusted member of a faculty that they can seek out. Provide all students with the complaint process and forms. We still think it's important they know what those are and what they look like, even if we don't think they may readily access those on their own. They should at least know what it looks like and how to navigate that. And then provide information on resources for emotional support. So if we do get into a situation where we know a kid's been bullied or harassed, or that there's a group dynamic going on, what is our follow-up and what kind of resources do we have to put in place to try to rectify that situation and restore relationships between peers within our schools. So those are the 2 big slides that he had prepared for you. I'm happy to answer questions, but we really felt like it was important to start with those 7th and 9th grade prep students right away this summer and incorporate some of this so we're engaged in those conversations, and then to continue this work throughout the year in refining that. I didn't attach all the resources we're using, but you can see some of those on that separate presentation, some of the things he's pulling from.
2 quick questions, Matt. I know it lists just the incoming 7th and 9th graders, but do you also include new students to the district in that training?
New students to the district most likely wouldn't have been recruited for those or had the opportunity to sign up for those prep programs, but they'll be included in some of these other measures throughout the year. So we see that's why it's important to make sure we engage the larger group of the student body during the school year. But those prep programs would have primarily been our students that have matriculated through the system that would have had the opportunity to sign up for the prep programs. It's not to say a new student couldn't have, wouldn't have not been able to, but most likely not.
Then my second question was about staff training. I guess my main question was just what type of, not necessarily what type of training do you give them, but do you go over some of the new social media, whatever the hit at the time is, at that moment, just so people know kind of what to look for, maybe?
Yeah, and I think it's less about knowing what to look for on a kid's device. You know, we generally don't ask staff members to go through that. Really, that's an administrator situation if we feel like there's something there. It's more about relationship building and how to make sure we're consistently building relationships with our students, and our teachers do a great job of that to make sure they're picking up on clues where a kid may be down or changing behavior, and asking you know, if they can help, or getting them to an adult they do trust to share some of that with. So I think that's where the staff training component comes in, is how do we identify that maybe a student is having a hard time, if there's something different going on there. And of course, you know, teachers in classrooms with kids with cell phones, they know if, you know, there's they're on their cell phones when they shouldn't be, and some of those things. So that's the cell phone policy piece about being on or off, but I really think it comes down to that relationship component and knowing what to do if a teacher or another staff member learns of a troubling situation for a student and how to navigate that.
Yeah, and I guess I wasn't meaning them going into their phones, just like what they may be experiencing. You know, someone may not know what Snapchat is, so just to know what type of things are happening.
And I think we do have a lot of those conversations informally about different social media platforms students are on, just from, you know, the kind of monitoring of cell phone usage during that time period, to know if they're on their phone and you see them, said they're working and they're actually on this app, that's a problematic app, or that's not something that we should be doing. Just so you know, the only real app we do block from a web sourcing standpoint is Snapchat. We haven't really defined that there's any kind of educational use for that. So we do block the use of that on our network, but of course if students have their own data plan, they, you know, find their ways around that. But I do think there's some conversation about these are the platform students are moving to.
Now, with everyone getting, or we're rolling out the Chromebooks this year, do we have, when we were looking at the cell phone policy, it varied from school to school, and that, do we have a clearly defined, this is our policy, and hard examples of what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior with those devices?
Yeah, we work to develop a consistent policy with all of our schools that is in the handbook. For the core of the policy is the same between our secondary schools there. That was part of the work we took on this year.
All right, and I mean, it goes the gambit from sexting to body shaming to...
Yeah, it identifies all the inappropriate behavior. You know, consequences, again, are dependent upon the situation and repeated behavior, those different factors that go into it. But it does clearly identify appropriate versus inappropriate behavior.
Right, and as far as, since, you know, the Chromebook is going to be part of, you know, the normal backpack, if you have someone that abuses the technology, what are your measures at that point? If you're taking it away and it's part of the curriculum, how do we go about tackling that situation?
Sure, I think that, again, is somewhat contingent on the situation and if it's been a repeated offense or what that is. If it is a learning tool, you know, I don't think our first step is to take the device away. I think it's to deal with the inappropriate behavior. We know that students, though at times, have lost their privileges in our libraries and access to technology. So we treat that as a behavior situation and still try to give them accessible materials to make sure their learning's not impeded from that, because they shouldn't be punished or have any kind of consequences based on behavior for their learning opportunities. But we need to deal with that inappropriate behavior. And could that result in a Chromebook being removed from a student? Sure, it could, but I don't think that would be our first avenue to go.
And one last, sorry, Laura, just one last one. On the curriculum, as far as coursework, there was discussion about having it be pass-fail and that students would have to successfully complete coursework pertaining to digital citizenship before getting that. Essentially, they're going to get it, and we're just going to hope that we've reached them at this point. But in the future, will we be trying to establish a successful completion of the training before they get the technology?
I think what you're referring to is if we had some kind of a check off to say, hey, you've been through this digital citizenship curriculum in that sense, and we would treat that like any of our other homeroom lessons. So if there's, you know, rules or procedures we'll go over, we expect students to participate in that, acknowledge that they understand what those are, and then proceed from there. So it'll be delivered in homerooms. Is it through a module format or anything like that, Phil? I wouldn't say no, we're not to that point yet. But we do intend to deliver this to all of our students and they will have had exposure to it. They will acknowledge that they participated in it, and then that will be follow-up if we see any inappropriate behavior.
So I just have a couple comments. So this presentation that you have, not on the screen, but that you'll be giving to the students at the orientation, is this the extent of what you're doing in addition to talking about it, or are you doing some other things too?
I think, like the commenter mentioned, we're continually refining it. So this is what we're delivering to the prep programs, but I think we're learning as we go and continuing to try to adjust that. Just like technology, we have to be very nimble in those conversations. There's some consistent things in there, procedures and protocols we'll continue to follow, but we intend that this would be the core of the conversation. But then we have to get into those other bigger topics like empathy, and trying to establish a sense of that and what that means. So there's the nuts and bolts of social media, but then there's those bigger soft skills we want our students to have, and I think that's an important part of the conversation too.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad to hear that. Not an expert on teenagers. You probably are more than I, except that I have some in my household. And I do know that they are very good at tuning out when adults teach them things. So just a suggestion I might make is to do something in a video format. Mm-hmm. If you could even have the students at the school prepare the video themselves, I think they'd even be more tuned into it. I just hear about the announcements that get made over the loudspeaker and how the kids look at their phones during the announcements. Yeah. It'd be a shame for them to miss this.
Yeah. I know one example that's been brought up different times about cell phone use in the restroom, right? So I remember when I was at Southeast, we actually had students produce a video about why it was inappropriate to use your cell phone in the bathroom, and that was much better received. So I think anytime we can leverage students to help us share some of these messages and share why it's appropriate or inappropriate or how it makes people feel uncomfortable, and those, it's like you said, it comes from a different voice, and that helps.
Just to add on, our City and West students did a great job on videos on respect, right?
They are terrific at it, and the kids tune in when they see their own classmates and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Then the other thing I just wanted to mention is you mentioned that the bullying forms are to be completed in cases of cyberbullying. How many bullying forms have we received for cyberbullying?
I don't have the data on our bullying forms now, but I would tell you most of the bullying situations that I know Kingsley's office deals with or that Amy and I end up working on with our building principals, I would say 90% of them start on social media. I mean, really, a lot of them are just, that's where the root of it is, and then it's coming into the school, and, it may end up in a face-to-face interaction, but a lot of our bullying situations, if not, close to all of them, are starting there, and, I don't think I'm leaping there to say that, but most of them are starting in some kind of a social media or online platform.
And I'm glad to hear that we're really encouraging the students to do these forms. I'm sure they would think it's just boring and a pain, but if they can see it, like, for example, at the hospital, we have something that's an incident report that we encourage everybody to do because we can't address problems until we have documentation that they occur. And if the kids can be informed that even though, this is boring and all that, but the more forms they can get done, the more we can address the problem. I don't know how to get that message through to them, but making it as accessible as possible to the kids and also to the parents, but especially to the kids is a good idea. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Brian, you go.
You're good.
You're good. Okay. I just have a few questions about some of the logistics, especially now that we have the, I keep forgetting the words for them, these laptops going on. Chromebooks, thank you. So when I read users have no right of expectation or privacy with respect to their use of school technology, school administration and IT personnel retain the right to access and monitor the activities and files of users at any time for any reason on school-owned devices. I see how that's something we can do, but I partly wonder, are we just asking for trouble if we're sending kids home with Chromebooks? And do these Chromebooks, I assume they can go on social media on the Chromebooks?
They're on social media all the time, Chris.
You have no expectation of privacy on these things. We're going to send you home with them. Boy, it just seems like you're going to ask for problems. I don't know. I know, you can't take all the you can't take email away from them, certainly. You couldn't block Well, so there's that.
I really see it as our responsibility that, you know, it's an educational opportunity for us, and the students are being confronted with these situations all the time. And if we don't take advantage of the educational opportunity while they're around trusting adults and can make a mistake and learn from it, they're going to go out into the community and make those mistakes, and that's going to be big time consequences for them. So I really think that's part of our responsibility in this Chromebook initiative, is to help them understand that, and this gives us a better opportunity to do that.
I'm not even saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just trying to think through the implications, and I guess I would go back to our community commenter's comment that it is. I mean, it's a learning experience, and it should be handled as a learning experience. I mean, to some extent at least. And then I think the other thing I wonder about, and there's a slide up in here that I guess is part of the slides the kids see. My actions on social media when I am at home are under the same legal guidelines as when I am at school. And I'm thinking, is there a simple yes or no answer to that question? Again, it doesn't just say on school-owned devices. Is there a distinction between, you certainly can't go home. I mean, the next page makes it sound like you can literally come to their house in the evening and search their computer, their laptop that's school issued at any time for any reason. I assume you can't do that with their private devices.
What's the question?
So is it an accurate, I mean, I don't know what the answer is presented to these questions when they're asked to the students, but isn't there a distinction between what you can do as far as students either on school-owned devices or in school time versus students at home and their expectation of privacy?
I really think the core issue is if it causes the disruption at school, whether it's on a private-owned device or if it's on a school-owned device. If it's causing a disruption or violating a school rule, that's where that privacy piece comes in, and where, you know, we will intervene in those situations. And so, do we want to search devices? Absolutely not. You know, we don't want to have to do that. I think the expectation of privacy piece gets into, you know, when we have large classrooms with several monitors and you know, we have some software that, you know, scrolls through screens to make sure kids are on task. You know, I think that's where it's speaking to. If a kid was off task there, you know, the teacher's going to have the right to intervene in that situation. Are we going to go to a kid's house and search, you know, a device or pull the device? You know, it'd be a pretty extreme situation that we would feel like we would need to get to something like that. So I really think it talks about disruption, and then you have multiple levels of what that disruption could or couldn't be and how we would intervene in that.
And that's my understanding, too, as far as the degree to which you can police things that are happening off campus has to be connected to some kind of disruption on campus. Whereas with school-owned stuff, I mean, I think you're within your legal rights to say, listen, if you use this thing, we can, you know, you have no expectation.
Right.
I mean, you're within your legal rights to say that. You don't have to show a disruption at all, probably, with a school-owned device. So, I mean, I guess pulling back, you know, I'm kind of come at things sometimes from a civil liberties point of view. I understand that in school, it's different. When you're kids, it's different. And I guess I just worry that if all we say to them is, you have no expectation of privacy, you know, I hope we're teaching them also that at some point people do have an expectation of privacy when they're not kids anymore. And I wouldn't want to leave that part of the message out.
And I think we're sharing that. I think it's, you know, the conversation about appropriate use. I think that's the thing is, you know, you do have, you know, kind of, you have an expectation of privacy when you're using things appropriately and not creating a problem. If you do create a problem, obviously then some of those privacy rights, you know, we're going to intervene in those situations, like I said before. So I do take note of that, and I think that's an important part of the conversation to make sure we share with them, you know, that we just don't lead with that and that be it, because we don't get to some of those other more important conversations that we want them to learn from and improve from too if they do make a mistake, if they're constantly fearful.
I mean, you know, I'm looking at it from the background of being concerned about the erosion of the legal expectation of privacy, at least among adults.
Right.
And so just be careful about how we send those messages. I had a smaller question about going back to cell phone use, and we had talked earlier a little bit about cell phone use in the locker rooms. Anything happen on that as far as sort of what the enforcement is? And maybe Kingsley's the guy to ask.
Yeah, just like, you know, anything in the locker room, we try to police is probably not the right word, but supervise that as much as possible. Well, again, you know, there's some privacy expectation from our students in the locker room there too, but the use of devices, we've really tried to say, you know, we should not be using those in locker rooms, restrooms, Are we catching all of those things 100% of the time? I'm not going to lie to you and say we are, but we are being extra vigilant in trying to get staff to supervise there, remind students that we're not using devices in those spaces and why we're not using those devices in those spaces. So that's a consistent thing I think we're continuing to talk about on our administrative team, and how to handle all of those situations, because we know, especially at our high schools with the amount of events, that we have a lot of frequent traffic through there, and we want to make sure kids are respectful of each other in that situation.
Okay, thanks.
So I'd just like to echo Director Rotland and Director Lynch's comments to get students involved in video. Short YouTube will go around like a virus. It'd be great. I think it'd probably be received much better. But when I think about our digital citizenship and this plan going forward, in the same way that we're improving safety and security of our buildings, a lot of this is about safety and security of our kids. And there's some statistics about 6 statistics I want to go through. And some of them were in the presentation, but 69% of teens own their own computer, cell phone, and use social media. 42% of youth report being bullied online. The average teen sends 60 text messages a day, which I think is actually low. That's double the rate for adults. Over 81% of teens admit that bullying is easier to get away with online. This one is very sobering. 20% of kids that are cyberbullied think about suicide. And 1 of 5 cyberbullying incidents is reported to authorities. So I really applaud the initiative being taken here to not allow things to be the Wild West. To say this is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable. To sit down with kids and teach them in their homerooms that this is the way that we're trying to teach you to become a responsible citizen. And I just wanted, some of those statistics are scary, especially the suicide one. And I just wanted to make note that I think it's very important that you're working on this, and very important that this is being rolled out and more accessible in a way that will be well received by the kids.
Yep.
All for it.
You bet.
That's all.
So Matt, is there anything you need from us? I know we've had a couple work sessions on this, and there'll be continuing conversation, right? Anything you need from us tonight?
No, I think we feel like we have a plan to move forward, and are prepping for the Chromebook rollout, and see this as a critically important component of it.
One more point, going back to the other one, setting the bullying issues aside, I guess I'd just speak up again for the idea of policy and governance maybe taking a shot at really trying to pin down, what can or what does or doesn't count as a student record that gets treated as private. I mean, you can imagine students' browsing histories, might contain sensitive stuff. And if it just says, well, we can access your material at all the time, at any time, no matter what you're doing on our device, I think just we need to have procedures in place about what you can do with that information. And of course, every time you go on the internet at all, somebody out there collecting your data to some extent. So I just keep wanting to flag that issue when it comes up.
Well, Matt, thanks. It's been great to see this evolve, and as you say, it's our opportunity to help our students mature in the cyber world. And we talked the one-to-one tonight. I mean, of course, that helps the students who have the least resources the most, right? And that's why it's just so critical to delivering our strategic plan. So thank you. Thanks to Kingsley, everybody involved. All right, next item on the agenda is the very exciting assessment of the weighted resource allocation model and its impact.
Good evening, everyone. Diane and I are here to share just what President Lynch said, talk about our elementary RAM and the fact that last year we changed the superintendent directions, the board did. In previous years, our K2 class aspirational size was 24, and our grades 3-6 was 28. And so This slide shows what the aspirational goals were changed to, and we're talking about opportunity gaps. So identified opportunity gaps is either low, average, or high, and you can see the targets then for K2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. So we went about staffing our elementary buildings based on this new model. So this is a depiction of how our buildings then fell out. You can see that 6 of our buildings fell into group 1, which would have been considered that high opportunity gap group. Our average group contained the 3 buildings you see listed there, and then low opportunity gaps, we had 11 buildings involved there. And then this depiction shows what our student makeup looks like within each of those RAM groups then. And I'll leave that up there for a minute, but as I'm sharing that data, I would also just like to add, as a reminder, that across the district, some of the statistics that aren't shown here is roughly all of our students at the elementary level, about 10% of them are ELL students, 35% free and reduced lunch students, and 9% special ed. But of course, as you think about these buildings by RAM, they look drastically different. So just to paint a little bit of a picture, in that RAM Group 1, our ELL percentages range from 14 to 26%, our FRL percentages from 60 to 78%, and then our special education percentages from 10 to 12%. In Group 2, ELL 7 to 21%, free and reduced lunch 40 to 49%, and 8% with our special education population. As compared to RAM Group 3, ELL 0 to 16%, and of course that would reflect the fact that some of our buildings do not have ELL programming in them, and that is a move that we're trying to make in the future to have all of 20 of our buildings have ELL programming. Our free and reduced price lunch range at Group 3 is 10 to 32%, with the special education percentages ranging from 3 to 10%. That just paints a broad picture of kind of where we're at and the differences between those 3 groups. The next couple of slides then, we're going to show you how our reading assessment data came out in regards to our DRA data and our FAST data. Of course, we will not have Iowa assessment data until we give that again in the fall to make any sort of comparison there. So I'll let Diane share this bit with you.
So like Amy said, we looked at DRA and FAST because that's the data that we have that we could compare fall to spring, and we could also compare last year's spring to this year's spring. So when we looked at our spring scores, and we give the DRA, the Developmental Reading Assessment, to all of our students in grades K through 6, and we look at the percent of kids who are proficient on those in the spring, you'll see we broke that down between 15, 16 percentages, and we looked at them in the areas of ethnicity. So the total RAM Group 1 in 15-16, they were at a 54.89% proficient. But by 16-17, that group had increased to 65.95 proficient. So they actually had an 11% increase in their proficiency. And that's the group that had the highest opportunity gaps. Then when we look at RAM Group 2, they went from 70, and they dropped just a little to 69, so they were a negative 1.24. And then RAM Group 3 went from 78.73 to 80.44, so they increased by 1.71. So this might indicate that we saw the most growth in the RAM Group 1 that really we gave the most resources to.
Why do you say might?
I think because it's 1 year worth of data. So it did. So it did. Okay. Something made a change, definitely. And I think with 1 year's worth of data, we can see that this is a great increase, and we're hoping to replicate that in the future as well.
Have you ever seen a year-to-year increase like that?
We haven't, to be honest. When we look back at historical DRA data, we haven't seen that.
Can I just, since we're into the numbers, I don't want to make you have to flip slides, but so the delta between Group 1 and 3 a year ago was 23.5%.
Yep.
And then the delta this year was 14.4%. So 9% reduction. So the gap got reduced by 40%. So that, I mean,
Right.
so statistically significant. I know you probably haven't done the math, but that to me looks very significant, statistically significant, right? Yes, no?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay,
Right.
good. So have we ever seen a gap closure like that?
Say that again.
Have we ever seen that magnitude of gap closure in a year?
I don't think we have.
That's amazing.
That's remarkable.
And then we can move on to look at the FAST data as well. So the FAST data we, again, looked at from group 1 to 3 and looked at 15-16 versus 16-17. And you saw that RAM group 1 increased 3.72%, RAM group 2 increased 2.59%, and RAM group 3 increased 1.95%. So again, larger increases in RAM group 1 where we gave the most amount of resources.
So directionally the same,
Yep,
right?
very much.
Is there a comparable chart for FRL versus non-FRL?
You know, we did not for FAST. We weren't able to do that because of the vendor. They didn't have the FAST or the FRL information accurate in it, so we weren't able to look at that.
Do you think in the future that might be something we'll be able to get?
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
We were able to get it earlier, just in the spring semester, for whatever reason it fell off and it wasn't working. And now they're transitioning away from Iowa Tier to use a different vendor, FastBridge, and so we're never going to have that particular data set, which is unfortunate.
So my first question is, how can you both not be sitting there with big smiles as you're presenting this? Because
You know,
this is remarkable data.
It is remarkable data, but you know, we're cautious and we want to see it replicated next year. And then we also know that, you know, looking at our ethnic groups, we certainly have areas that have great need for improvement. So we have a lot of work still ahead of us.
So one of the things that I want to go back to Leadership for Student Learning, which is a program that both this board and the previous iteration of the board has gone through. And how do board decisions affect student outcomes? And I want to point out our strategic plan, setting the goals, agreeing on our goals, setting those goals and working to achieve those. There's a number of things, just to review for people in the room who might not remember, that we've been doing to try and help get at this achievement gap that is so difficult to see when the reports come out every year. One thing, and I saw Joan back there, attendance busing, to help with students with significant transportation barriers, making sure that they get to school, because kids in school learn better than kids not in school. Hate to say it, it's true. Second thing, this is a credit to this group, all sitting up here, is the Bell schedule. Improving the hours of educational time per year in our elementary levels, about a half hour per day, focused on reading and math. Okay. Most recently, 1 year ago, weighted resource allocation we put into policy. These are remarkable numbers. Weighted resource allocation was something that we talked about back when David Duty was here. He had an awesome spreadsheet with, you know, weighting every little detail, and we could never move forward until that was put into policy. And the fact that we've made these types of changes, and you're starting to see some really impressive gains. This is, I'm going to use the word again, remarkable. Going from, on the DRA data, going from 44% to 54% proficiency in 1 year's time among our students of color, that is remarkable. That is something to be celebrated, and something we can't say, hey, done. Right. There's a lot to do yet, but this is an example of how board work, setting the policy and letting you guys put it into action. It's making such significant improvements. And you know, Chris and I are coming around the corner on 4 years up here, and I think I'm going to be watching closely from the other side because I'm really anxious to see continued improvement here and see that gap get narrower and narrower. I don't realistically think we're going to see 10.5% jump on DRA, you know, next from year to year to year, but we might. That'd be remarkable yet again. But sitting there and wringing our hands every year and seeing the reports and going, oh boy, that really bugs me. Oh, well. I mean, it also starts with disaggregating the data out. We were never doing that before. So you got to get the appropriate data. I mean, these are just ways, multiple ways where the board work is what's showing up and being reflected in our classroom outcomes. And I hope there's a point where we're not saying, oh boy, look at that data, our students of color are not doing as well as their peers. That shouldn't be acceptable to anybody up here, and we've got work to do. I also have to admit, it's a little bit hard for me to sit here and see 3J6 in writing, because there's a lot of words that Latasha put in there. And I wish she was up here to be able to comment on it. And I'm sure she'd say the same thing, we got a long way to go. I hope she'd say that. Latasha, if you're watching, please feel free to email me and let me know I quoted you wrong. But, you know, the words are important. The words are so important. Opportunity gaps. All of our kids can learn. All of our kids can achieve. And I'm so happy to see some of these numbers. I have been bouncing since I first saw these numbers. So thank you for bringing these to us. And maybe, you know, maybe I'm off base being excited about it, but by God, I think it's something huge to be excited about.
I know we probably look reserved, but we're staff as well. We want to make sure that this is going to be the trend, right, and not something that we see kind of fluctuate. We're super excited. We want to see it translate this fall into Iowa assessment data as well. We really think it's important to triangulate data, so to look at the DRA, to look at the FAST assessment, to look at Iowa assessments. They're all asking our children just a little bit different information, testing them in a little bit different way. Not one authoring team on an assessment is ever asking kids the same number of questions on a particular standard, so it just provides us a nice flavor. The data suggests that we're moving in the right direction, but we don't want to back off from, you know, where we're at in our development. So. The other thing I would say is I appreciate what Charlie said about just getting into the nuances of some of this. The power in Iowa tier, when he said, you know, there's so much more that we can look at than just these building proficiencies, and then disaggregating it, whether it's by FRL status, special education, ethnicity. We're also able to track what % of our kids are being progress monitored that should be being progress monitored. What % that were proficient in the fall stayed proficient in the spring. What % that weren't proficient in the spring that stayed proficient in the fall. So there's so many things that we're asking our buildings to do 3 times a year, and we utilize our IDS, or our instructional design strategists and elementary principal meetings, to do that. And so there is a deep dive going on, but what's made it possible is to have assessment systems, these data warehouses as powerful as Iowa Tier. Now you heard me say earlier that we're moving away from it because it wasn't very functional last fall. The kinks got worked out, at least for the end users, in the winter and spring, but we are transitioning over to FastBridge. So we haven't seen what those reports are going to be able to generate yet. We are in the middle of seeing our first webinars right now, and we'll have a couple more coming up. So again, we're excited, and I think we are probably a little bit cautious, but it's just because we want to see how this translates and translates.
So I have a whole list of comments and questions. I'm having a hard time deciding which ones to focus on so I don't monopolize the time. I guess one thing I want to say that's very important is there's so much data that there's no possible way we could pull everything out of it with the staff resource time that we have. Can we get somebody from a university like the Public Policy Center did for us on climate study? Can we get somebody from a Department of Education to pursue a grant or something to really dive into this? Because, you know, this is only looking at class size, but there's so many more things that these 6 schools have that could be impacting this other than class size. Behavior interventionists, SAMs, full-time floats for subs. There's other things that I know these 6 schools have in addition to lower class sizes. What is it that's giving us gains? I don't think that we have enough information here to make that judgment. I mean, I don't think a small class size hurts anything, but I think that there's a lot more to dive into.
If you recall, we had Steve Dunbar and Kathy Welch from the University of Iowa join us. I'm not sure if that's coming through. They came in and presented some test data for us last year. I talked to them today as part of our partnership with the College of Ed. They're very interested in coming back in and helping us do some of this data disaggregation. They obviously have a far greater wealth of resources when it comes to that kind of data analysis, and perhaps some staff and graduate students that might be able to participate in this kind of longitudinal process with us. So they're excited about that opportunity.
Great. I would just love to see us dive a lot deeper than we have. I asked the question at the last minute, and I look forward to the answer when you get a chance. I'm interested in the different grade levels because, you know, I'm curious where are we seeing, I mean, this lumps K through 6 together, but where are we seeing the greatest difference in achievement with class size? Is it in the kindergarteners to first grade? Is it from the 5th to 6th grade? That's one thing I'm looking forward to getting when you get a chance. And my fault for asking at the last minute. I own that. I'm really concerned about group number 2. A lot of good things going on here, by the way. I don't mean to minimize any of the good things going on, but since we've already hit on that, I'm going to now bring out some of the things I'm concerned about. So I did just a little bit of going through our different reports, and in Group 2, some of those schools had bigger class sizes than as many as 5 of the schools in Group 3. If that makes sense to you. On average, they had bigger class sizes. So the group, Horace Mann, Coralville Central, and Horn are, and as we see with the DRA assessment, actually lost ground, 1.24% as a whole. So I'm really concerned. Also, I calculated the most mobility and least stability statistics, and two out of those 3 schools in Group 2 fall into the top 6 most mobile schools in our district, and one of them falls into the top 6 least stable, meaning a student is there from day 1 to the end of the school year. So lots of needs there. I'm wondering what we can do for Group 2 to address the fact that they're actually losing ground.
The one thing I would say is one of those buildings, the one thing I would offer is one of those buildings in that Group 3 probably made our biggest gains in that year's time. So that's just a piece.
In Group 3?
In Group 2, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Made some of the great, so by lumping them together, we're not seeing that, you're saying? Okay. So then I don't know, I don't know if that's information that the community can have, pulling out by individual schools, and maybe the 2 out of the 3 that didn't have the tremendous gain in that group, can they get more resources?
That's going to be up to, if we want to add different things, I just think of our RAM model, and we've identified those 3 areas. So it would be whether we want to add other pieces in there. Mobility, you mentioned that. Is that a factor? And I think it is. And the building I'm thinking of that has great mobility, they're also having really good success.
So can I suggest we put this on the next Education Committee meeting? I know that would be the next board, really. But I think it'd be good onboarding for them, and then go get deeper into some of the questions, and if there's any adjustments we want to make, or...
I'm afraid decisions will be made for the school year as of August 4th, after you have your registration deadline on August 3rd. So I'm not sure if it'll come before the Education Committee in time for next year's school decisions for teacher allotment. So I guess I'll just make a plea. Can we move some of those schools in Group 2 up to Group 1 and just have 2 groups instead of having 3 groups?
I don't know if that's a question I can answer. I feel like there's board superintendent directions right now that say this is what we need to look at. We based our staffing allocations in May based on what we see here in the directions. Not that we won't be looking at numbers. Of course, in August, we'll have to be looking at numbers again and making slight adjustments.
The challenge is it becomes a policy question, right? A policy question, then it becomes a fixed budget. So if you're taking, if you're going to move some resources, and that's what we did here. We moved resources from Group 3 to Group 1. And so where would the resources come from is the second part of your question.
Maybe I just happen to be meeting on this tomorrow, so I know one of the things that we certainly could do is we can run those numbers so we know what the impact is, and that would give us a better idea of how big a reach it is.
Now, a very fair question is, we've established class size goals, and if there's schools like in group 2 that seem like they're higher than that, why is that, and what are the options? So there could be options within the current policy to say, are we really meeting the intent of group 2? Now, as we know, there's always weird things that go on. You get weird grade sizes or, school sizes, but, that might be the fair question you can ask now and for the start of school is, are we on our class size goals, right?
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm just really pushing on this, but where do we stand for next year's new teacher hires versus increase in students?
I think HR has us close to 100, we're going to be around 100 new teachers.
So I guess this is a hard thing to get at, but our class size is going to be even bigger.
We staffed in May, we staffed according to the aspirational goals, and we were spot on. Now, of course, we don't know what's going to happen after registration and as kids walk through our door on August 23rd, but as of May, they were staffed very nicely against those aspirational goals.
Okay, and with these 3 groups?
Right.
Going by those model, okay.
We're under the aspirational goals for all of our elementary schools at all grade levels right now. We're monitoring it on a weekly basis. We get Power School updates, and then we take those numbers, feed them in. We've been making some adjustments over the course of the summer, and that's part of the hiring process, too.
Okay.
As I said, as we're looking at it on a weekly basis, Amy and I are going to look at it tomorrow. So using those Power School numbers that we rolled up last Friday, we'll be able to take a look at it. And we can do Group 2 as if it were Group 1 and look at what the impact is and determine whether or not that's something that's feasible for us to do.
Okay, and then maybe they could also get some of those extra supports too, like a full-time float, sub, some of the other things that, the policy only talks about class size, but I know there's other supports that are going into those 6 schools that the other ones aren't getting.
I would add, Lori, that we did qualify 2 additional schools as Title I buildings this year. So coming this year, Horn and Weber will now come on as Title I buildings. So they are going to be able to hire 1.0 reading teacher as well as have access and the ability to hire a AmeriCorps reading tutor. Not everybody that was offered that last year was able to hire a tutor, but that's an offering for those 2 buildings as well. So 10 of our 20 will have that designation, which again gives them more resources.
And maybe if I could just add one more. I know Chris is trying to wrap that up.
No,
but,
I'm not wrapping it up.
One of the, we know that the superintendent directions speak directly to certified staffing, but we've also applied the RAM model to support staffing, also to SAMs, our school administration managers, also applied it to technology. So what we're trying to do is, in the spirit of the superintendent directions, look at it beyond just class size. So we look at it with the allocation of adults in the building in general. And so when I say we'll take a look at it as it pertains to Group 2, we'll look at it across all those various allocation areas.
Okay, great.
No, I was just going to say, to close your point, it's great to hear we're going to hit our aspirational class sizes, right? Can't wait to see that. And it's only because we've made a series of very tough decisions to focus resources in the classroom that's happening.
Okay. My last comment is for the board, not so much this board, but the future board, those candidates that are out there. When we wrote this policy, one thing that I raised that I was very concerned about is there is not a definition of what an average FRL school is. I asked for that to be a percentage point of like plus 10% of district average, or some kind of definition, so it's not just sort of a nebulous, oh, these 6 are, 10% higher than 50% or whatever. You guys are making that decision, but to the future board, I would like to see a more specific definition of what average is for FRL, to define where the schools fall in these groups.
So just to close, since we're talking Group 1, 2, 3, and we've kind of talked 1 and 2, just a comment on 3, right? So really this model, we reduced class size in Group 1, right, by 20%, basically 24 to 20. In theory, Group 2 was neutral. In theory, you got to look at the execution. But Group 3 went up, right? So we went from like 24 to 26, so whatever, 8% or whatever. And it didn't hurt Group 3. So I think the other important part of this discussion, because there was concern about, as we're taking, resources from Group 3 to 1, what's going to happen? Well, we've seen there's not a hurt. 3 actually went up, and we saw, I would call it historic
I'd call it remarkable.
breakthrough in Group 1. So I just wanted to point that out, that while taking Group 3 up, and again, we got to be careful on that side of the equation. We don't take it too high, but there wasn't any harm done, based on this data at least, aggregated.
I have one more comment, and that's about sustainability, long-term sustainability. It's important to remember that, back to what you said before with our legislative priorities, is that being able to do this requires tough decisions on our part, making sure the dollars are in the classroom and making sure that we have timely and adequate funding from the state. So we need to continue to hammer that hard. And to remember that I always use the example of short, middle, and long-term approach to trying to address the achievement gap. This is the short-term approach in my mind. The middle-term approach is as our boundaries start to kick in 2019, when Hoover becomes its own elementary school east of Scott Boulevard. And additionally, as a new elementary school is added up in North Liberty, the boundary decisions that will be made there. And then the final thing is the school board, going all the way back to 2014, addressing our municipal leaders and saying you have to have a responsible approach to affordable housing and development. We need to make sure that we don't have these outliers 10 years and 15 years into the future, because I personally question the sustainability of continuing to put all the resources into RAM and not address the other issues. So I think we need to think about it as short, middle, and long-term approach. This is one tool in the toolbox. There's a lot of tools in there. So that's all, just one more.
I just want to make a quick comment. I know Chris and Phil also wanted to say something too, but I'll keep my comments brief. Brian kind of said what I was going to say, that I'm happy with some of the results that are on here, but I'm not pleased, I guess, is the answer. When you said that, when you mentioned Latasha, I always look at the number and I remember the quote she said. She said she has twins at home, and to have the Black and African American numbers still be at 50% means that one of her two children are not going to be proficient at reading. So I don't want us to be overly excited with the numbers for our Black or African students, or Hispanic or Latino students for that matter, when it's under 50 or 60%. So we still need to work on that, and that's a big concern for me. As I sat up here listening to some more of this discussion, I started thinking about our staff that we have here also being underrepresented in those areas, and it made me think, if you're a staff, or if you're a member of that group and you're thinking about coming to teach here and maybe starting a family here, to see those numbers would be a little discouraging. So I really want to make sure that we continue to press on those to make sure we raise those, because I don't think any of us think they're acceptable numbers.
I'll second that motion. First of all, I just want to chime in with my usual caution about using a numerical data, which I think is very difficult. One of the things I really liked in the letter we got from the equity committee members who spoke, one of the suggestions they made was, what supports do we need as a district to do this level of data analysis? That's a good question, because I think data analysis is really hard. And so, yeah, I'm a little bit very cautious about reading into numbers that are from one year to the next. But, yes, sure, it's nice to see numbers go up. We do have some numbers on the chart that, on the DRA one especially, that went down. So that's something to worry about, too. But I guess I'm with Paul that if, this is good news, but we have a long way to go. I think for me the emphasis would still be that we have a long way to go, and that we don't want to send a message, and I don't think anybody here disagrees with this, we don't want to send a message like, okay, we're done. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks we're anywhere near done. And, they did have, I don't know, there's a good letter from the equity committee members that we heard from. And I guess if I were to just take two questions from it, because there are a number of questions they suggest that we ask. What is an ambitious but reasonable level of improvement to expect? And I'm not sure they specifically asked this next question, but you know, everybody knows this is just one thing we're doing and that we need to do a lot of things. I'm curious sort of, you know, what the administration's take is on, well, what are the most important things that we're doing in addition to this?
So in answering that question, can you bring up the student achievement plan?
Oh, one other quick question while you're doing that. When we look at the proficiency gaps in that big report that we get, usually in the fall, those are actually Iowa assessment numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So these aren't exactly the same. Mm-hmm. I understand this doesn't mean they're not worth anything. But you know, you can see even some differences between the FAST and the DRA, and so there must be some noise somewhere in there or some different measurements going on. So I just think you have to use a lot of caution with it. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that. I'm not saying anything you didn't already say.
Can you make it one bigger?
Uh-oh.
Change is good, apparently. But don't restart now.
Man, keep snoozing.
Oh, wait, what do I do? Snoozing. Okay, so this document represents all the improvements and advancements that we're trying to make for the general population, and then we've got it divided out to those supports that we have specific going on for special education students, English language learners, things that we would be doing to support our students that are coming from poverty, and then our cultural and equity approaches. The one thing that I think I'm proud of as we brought on our new directors this past year is really trying to make a valiant effort with our PD schedule. So thinking about those Thursday afternoons, our one full optional TQ day in August, as well as our full October day. We have a lot of people vying for time, and we have little opportunity for access to our staff to push these different initiatives. When I think about that, we've got our PD fairly well represented, whether it's PBIS, cultural competency types of approaches, our ELL modules that we still have to push out this year as directed by the Department of Ed, all districts across the state of Iowa. And then, of course, our focus on reading and mathematics. And all of those things, and our directors, rightfully so, are trying to compete for interest and time in front of our staff. In addition to that, we think about other opportunities we have to get in front of our staff, and that could be staff meetings once a week, our PLC meetings once a week, or our instructional leadership teams. And I feel like as we've marched through the year and we have different initiatives going on, we've almost got every single opportunity plugged in, or ideas for our building administrators what to do. So one caution I would give the group is all of us is not to continue to add, but look at what do we think is working. And I know we had this conversation at the Board Education Committee meeting. How can we drill down to figure out what those pieces are that are really making the difference? Somebody asked, what more are you going to do to help move the data forward? Part of me wants to say we just truly need to stay the course. But although we know that that works, we are moving forward on some other things. And so as Diane and I talked about what are those things that we know we have in place that are above and beyond what this represents. Of course, we've had the conversation this year about preschool and in trying to increase the capacity and bring more 4-year-olds from our communities into our buildings or into our community partners. We've got several pilots going on, and typically these pilots are happening in reading in our Title I buildings. And of course, we want to monitor, not all Title I buildings are doing the same pilot, so it's monitoring implementation. We've got 3 buildings next year implementing Super Kids, and that is a totally comprehensive program. Alexander Hills and Wood will be not using HMH, but they'll be using Super Kids. We want to pilot that to see it's a lot more decodable text in front of our kids, a lot more phonics based. It's not that it's absent from text. We don't want to give that impression either, but we want to see how our kids respond to that. A couple of other title buildings are implementing Jolly Phonics in addition to their HMH reading materials. We've got a product that we used Microsoft funds for last year to trial called LexiCore 5. It's a computer adaptive program that's giving kids, putting a variety of reading skills in front of them, kind of taking them through levels. It's not replacing small group. It's not replacing core instruction. It's used when they're not with the teacher in either small group or during that whole group instruction. We've also got a couple of our other buildings piloting some Lucy Calkins writing materials. Think about AVID. We had a little bit of discussion at the Board Education Committee about whether we would want to scale that up. We have extended that to Weber and Wood Elementaries next year, as well as increasing the capacity at Kirkwood by training a couple of additional teachers. And then next year we're going to try something with our PD schedule.
We know that we need to get PSYOP training to more of our teachers. Right now our model, and that's the Sheltered Instruction Observational Protocol, that's really just a nice big lesson design for what we should be thinking about as we are programming and putting our lessons together with the ELL learner in mind. But what you'll hear often from our teachers and administrators is when you put that lesson plan together, it's really good for all of our students, whether they're coming from poverty. Any student, it really responds better when you think about that total lesson design. Our struggle is that we can only, been about a three full day training in the summer, and our struggle is to get our staff in during the summer and to get all of our staff as big a population that we have. So we'd like to figure out if we can put those 15 to 20 hours and embed it into our PD schedule. So we're actually using Horn Elementary and taking some of their TQ day, perhaps. Kristen's going to promote this with her staff and get staff feedback, so it's not a 100% done deal. But we want to see if we can utilize that PD schedule to get the PSYOP training in and then scale that model up. So those are some things that we're doing, even though I still would caution us to say we're doing a lot here already, and we need to stay the course for the most part. Diane, would you offer?
Yeah. And I want to thank the Equity Committee. They brought up some great questions too, and I go along with Chris on, what are we seeing as expectable gains going forward. The differences between these scores and the fall assessments, could we get those as far as to get an idea of how close they correspond with the Iowa assessment scores at some point in time? And going to the elementary DRA data, when we look at the Hispanic and Latino group in the middle and group 3, they're both going down, and in fact the group 3 went down, started almost at the same proficiency that group 1 ended up at, and then those two kind of reversed each other. Do you guys have any kind of ideas on why those scores are such? Or?
I think that would be really hard for us to say. Dawn.
Okay. Well, it's not up the right direction, and I thought Lori had a very good suggestion on that. Also, do we or Grant Wood do any testing or evaluation for dyslexia?
So I would say that would be part of our child find process. And so when we think about a multi-tiered system of support for students, all students in our district would be getting core instruction. So I was referring to HMH materials earlier. That's what we provide as part of our core reading instruction. I'll just use reading as the example. When we give these universal screeners such as FAST, students are either falling out as proficient or non-proficient. By state rules or legislation, that ELI legislation that I shared with you a couple of years ago, the first time a student is non-proficient, they would be progress monitored on a FAST assessment once a week. If they're non-proficient 2 times in a row, then we are required to not only progress monitor them once a week, but then to also add an intervention. Some of our buildings will add that intervention right away. That is in addition to core instruction. That does not replace core instruction. So we monitor students over time. Those graphs then can show whether they're closing the gap, they're hitting their growth targets, and if they're not doing that at such a rate, it's then that we might move to a discussion around Child Find where we'll bring in the AEA to do that additional testing. So is dyslexia specifically tested for? No.
It's not, okay. Also, are we doing any kind of encouragement, outreach, support for parents in this?
Absolutely.
That's the one part of the equation that parents are the first teachers of their children, and what are we doing to encourage and help parents with?
Absolutely. So our students that are non-proficient over the 2 testing periods in a row, we are required in K3, but we've taken this and scaled it up, so we're doing this K6. We notify our parents. They come in for a conference. Usually we have that in conjunction with conference nights. We talk about what their assessment results look like, and we work around a contract. I don't know if you remember me talking about that. It's much like a Title I compact that we're required to use in our Title I buildings, but it essentially says things that we're going to be doing at school, things parents can be working on at home. It's really seen as a partnership. It's not to say, school should be doing more, parents should be doing more. We talk about that. In addition to that happening, of course, you have our progress reports. We're required for those kids that are non-proficient over those 2 testing periods to then follow up. And the way we follow up is through our progress reports. They are not only getting their report cards, but they'll get an update then on their FAST assessments for the next testing period. We've also scaled that requirement up, though, to all of our students. So all of our parents are being notified after each testing period how our students are doing on those FAST assessments. So there's never a time that our parents shouldn't be aware of what that looks like. We've also, I think, translated those documents into, including English, we have them in 7 different languages.
Quick follow-up on Phil's question. So when do the Iowa assessment results come through?
That is given in October, and we usually have results back in December.
Okay. I wasn't sure if they had already moved it to the end of the school year. Can't keep it straight, because I know that that's the idea, right? Eventually, they're going to do it at the end of the school year. Yeah, right.
Yeah, if it would be possible to check with some of the data here we have here with past, just to kind of see how closely they correspond with each other.
Yeah, we're interested in Iowa assessment data as well, so we won't have that first year of comparison data until December.
Okay.
So I just want, again, talking a little bit to future school boards too and the public, and to the organizations, a few things. You'll hear a theme from me probably, understand history or you're bound to repeat it, right? So I just want to say, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a great debate whether we should have a strategic plan. There was great debate whether we should even establish goals. There was great debate on why reading, why math, why equity. And of course, it came back, well, reading is the foundation for all future learning, math is the foundation for all future problem solving, equity is just a core belief in our district, right? That strategic plan has led to the plan like this, where 3 years ago we couldn't articulate pretty much on one page, here's what we're doing for our kids with the most opportunity. You look at the agenda tonight, equity policy really drove, the equity strategic plan really drove the equity policy, which drove all the work we're going to hear, digital citizenship, the LGBTQ conversation, the goals on reading and math. I know we're talking reading tonight, have really driven this whole plan. Again, understand history, you're bound to repeat it. You got to keep up with the strategic plan. You got to stay focused on these goals. Just like we talked, you got to desegregate the data and get into real root cause analysis, because people are like, well, reading 75%, what's wrong with that? Well, when you get into it, our African American students at 50% or Latino students at 60%, it's not okay. And now I would have told you what I feel good about is we've at least laid a foundation. And what I would have told you a year ago, and anybody who's talked to me about RAM, I think it's the most significant policy the school board has ever passed, period. History of the district. My most frequently asked questions from former school board members was, how did you ever get that passed? Because you're diverting resources from the majority to the minority. The majority that's very vocal to the minority that's not represented typically. And we got that done. And we only got it done because we had a strategic plan, we had very clear goals. When you start to look at the gaps, it becomes compelling to everybody that something needs to be done. And that's the linkage, and that's how this has happened. So the reason I get excited, it's not because mission accomplished, because what I would have told you a year ago too is this is the tough part about being a school board director, I think, and for you. Usually it takes multiple years. You make a change and it takes multiple years to see the benefit. I would have said you probably need 2 years of this to see the benefit. To see this in year 1 is amazing. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't stay the course, absolutely. Now build on it. As you know, and Amy, you hit it. I mean, Avid at Turkwood, we've seen amazing things. That's got to get rolled out. We got to figure out how to get that rolled out. So before we make up new things, I think we need to make sure we continue to do what's working. My biggest concern is this will unravel over time. There will be budget pressures. There will be pressures from the masses to undo it. And I think that'll be a huge tragedy.
And again, back to the words are important. The fact that it's encapsulated in policy. I hope any future board that tries to unravel it will have to explain and answer questions to the public why they're undoing it. And there better be darn good reason if it continues to be as effective as I think it's going to be.
And what we're dealing with here is decades, right, of inequity. So the fact that we've seen any improvement whatsoever, I think, is just a tremendous accomplishment now. For next year, just knock it down by 40% again. All right. Now, if you want to knock it down by 50% or 100%, go for it. I think the stretch goal is 100%. Mm-hmm. But if you come back with another 40, I think that'd be pretty good.
Great work.
Thank you.
All right, ooh, that's amazing. And thanks for everybody's passionate participation too. I mean, honestly, this is where we should be spending our time, and we definitely should be passionate about driving results here, so. With that, next item on the agenda is the LGBTQ report, and Steve, and I think Sarah's gonna take it directly.
She is. I'm just filling in for Kingsley on the intro role. So just a reminder for people that were not with us earlier this year, we started looking at our student culture and climate data. And one of the issues that came up as we looked at pressure points in the system was some of the subpopulations of students in the district. And again, we've got a great partnership with the Public Policy Center. And so one of the things that they did was, as we looked at that data and as we looked at those pressure points, one of the questions that immediately arose was this issue of our LGBTQ students and the experiences that they have. And there was a clear need on our part to better understand what the data told us. And so they reached back out, they dug a little bit deeper, and they're going to walk through that with us tonight. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I think you just covered my first slide, so that means forge right ahead. So I think that's what my introductory slide says. It says this is a follow-up to the time I was with you 2 months ago, and exactly what Steve said, so I'll just skip this one. So the policy brief that I'm presenting today, that all of you have in front of you, has 4 parts to it. So the first part of it really speaks to why is it important to look at the experience of LGBT students specifically, both in terms of thinking about the importance of it, but also digging into the literature in social science and education policy that says what's going on nationally. So this is helping us, this is where we come in and sort of leverage our expertise in being able to dive into the literature that exists that's outside of Iowa City to say what's happening nationally and what can we learn about that. So that's the first part of the policy brief. The second part of the policy brief does do the deeper dive into your own data to say, one, what can we learn about LGBTQ students in the Iowa City School District in terms of their profile? What do they look like other than being LGBTQ? So what is their racial makeup? What is their socioeconomic status makeup? What kinds of schools are they in, et cetera? The other part of that second section gives you a glimpse of some of what we found in the main report, which was pretty alarming, large, consistent, sort of systematic patterns of having more negative experiences in the schools here. So that section is pretty brief, and I'll go through it with you. The third section is, again, where we go back into the literature and we say, what are other districts and schools trying around the country to address similar issues? And what are those things that they've done that have any research, sort of effective, research of being effective, right? Evidence of being effective. So we pulled that together in the third section. The fourth section is very brief, and it says, okay, well, let's tie together the issues that we found in your district with the solutions that other districts have tried that have evidence of being effective, and let's make general suggestions for ways that you could move forward, taking those both into account. So that's the fourth section, the recommendations. So starting with the first section, it has 2 parts. The beginning of it just says, okay, well, we know from several different national surveys that LGBT students on average feel less included in school in various ways, that they have greater rates of reporting being victimized, especially when it comes to bullying and hearing negative comments about their sexual orientation or gender identities, and having lower levels of support from school staff, teachers, administrators when they do reach out to say they're having issues of different kinds. That's problematic on its own in terms of having those kinds of reported differences in student experiences in school. What the literature also shows is that having those negative experiences, these students having those negative experiences, has consequences. And those consequences are academic in terms of having lower GPAs, missing school more often. They're also psychological and mental. So having lower self-esteem, experiencing more mental health issues, and also having higher rates of substance abuse. So that's what we learned by looking in the national data to say, all right, we're not the only district in the country that has done student surveys and has started to do research on what's happening with LGBTQ students in schools, right? All right, so the second section is looking at your own data, looking at the Iowa City School District, and it's derived from the data that we did and presented to you in May. So again, in case people aren't familiar, it's the Student Experiences of School survey. It's administered this year to all students in 5th through 12th grade. It asks a number of questions, almost 100 questions, in fact. It's very comprehensive. It asks several things about relationships with teachers, staff, mentors, and counselors, and about inclusive school and classroom environments, and also this year about safety and disciplinary environment. So as I've mentioned to you guys in May, this year the survey was also different in that we included a wider range of gender identity options and included a question on sexual orientation so that students could identify in that way. We did that for several reasons. I went into detail about these in May, so I'll just mention them briefly here. We did that for several reasons. One, we got feedback from the first iteration of the survey back in 2016 that said, from families and students in the district that said, your survey, when I take that survey, I can't even identify the way that I want to. So they wanted to have more inclusive options so that they would feel like I'm represented on your survey. Second, it's developmentally appropriate. So this is something that a lot of people are not aware of in asking students for a non-binary gender identity or asking them about sexual orientation. A lot of the pushback that people have, either in this district or in other districts around the country, is that that's not developmentally appropriate for younger children. And so what we did is we looked at the literature to say, what do child development specialists say are the appropriate ages to ask children about gender identity that includes more than just male and female, and to ask about romantic or sexual attraction. What the literature says is that starting as early as ages 3 and 8, students can identify those things. The other reason we asked these questions or added them to the survey is to be in greater alignment with your own district equity statement. The district equity statement includes gender identity and sexual orientation in it, and so this is a way to be in alignment with that. Also, as I just mentioned in the first part of the presentation, in the first part of the policy brief, there's substantial documentation of research that shows disparate experiences for LGBT students. So the only way to look to see whether that's true in this district is to collect that data. Just like you guys have been talking about the importance of disaggregating the data, you have to ask the question in order to be able to disaggregate it in that fashion. Also, there's some suggestive research that says that it's actually beneficial for LGBT students to be able to self-identify in this way on something like a survey, on student documents. It gives them a greater sense of self-confidence, and it reduces mental health issues. So also, the last reason is because it helps you to collect baseline data. If you do decide to start a new initiative, a new program, pilot something, bolster what you're already doing in this area, you have baseline data so that maybe in a year from now, you could look at trends to see whether they're moving in the right direction. All right, so we asked questions. I want to tell you what they are so that when I start speaking in my code language, then you'll understand what I'm saying. So for 5th and 6th grades, we asked them, they could report that they're either male or female or other, and they could specify or just check other. For the 7th through 12th grade, they could check male, female, transgender female, gender queer, gender nonconforming, different identity, or prefer not to answer. So for all the other and other sort of gender identities, we classified those as non-binary. That's our shorthand for all of those categories. In total, that was 2% of the students that took the survey, a total of 82 students. The second question on sexual orientation asked, do you identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, or asexual? That was a yes or no question. Fully 8% of the sample said yes to that question. We refer to them in this report and in the previous report as LGB, and that was fully 376 students. So, first, I'll give you a snapshot of what these students look like, not just in terms of their gender identity or sexual orientation, but their racial demographics, their socioeconomic status, what kind of schools they're in, etc. So here I'm breaking it down by race, and I'm showing you only the yellow bars are the LGB students, and the gray bars are the non-binary. What you see here is first, LGB and non-binary students are most likely to be white, just like most students in the district. They're a little bit higher on average for LGB students than what your demographic makeup is, right? So they're more likely to be white than if they just randomly were distributed across the racial profile of the district. You can see that there's NA for Black, Latino, and Asian. For non-binary students, those numbers were less than 10, and at the Public Policy Center, we don't generally report data that's less than 10 just for student confidentiality reasons. The other thing to note here is that non-binary students and LGBT students are also more likely to be multiracial. So in terms of the demographic profile of them, these students are more likely to be white and multiracial than of other racial backgrounds. Next, looking at parental education, this has the same sort of yellow as LGB, gray as non-binary. And what this shows you is that similar to how your district is in general, it's a very privileged sort of environment in that you have very highly educated parents on average. You are a college town with lots of professors and doctors and lawyers. So lots of the students in your district have highly educated parents. LGB and non-binary students are not any different, with the exception that they're a little bit higher in having college age or post-college. So they do tend to come from a little bit more advantaged parental background status. The third thing I'm showing you is broken down by school type. So are they primarily in elementary, junior high, or high schools? What this is showing you is that there are much higher rates of them in junior high and high school. What that could mean is that these students feel more comfortable self-identifying. It could be that these students have a greater ability to know how to identify in that way, or it could in fact mean that there are more of them in middle school and high school, junior high and high school. But that's what this is showing you. The last one I'm going to show you that kind of gives you this profile and breaks this group into further distinctions is, what does it look like if you say, well, what percentage of students that identify as male have an LGB sexual orientation? What this is showing you is that that number is only 4%. So of the male identified students, only 4% say they're LGB.
That's K through 12. That's K through 12.
The survey is given out to 5th through 12th graders.
Right. That's all ages combined, though.
The next bar over is for females, and this is saying that 10% of female students report being LGB. Then when you move to the last bar where it's non-binary gender identity, fully 3/4 of them are saying that they identify as LGB. So there's some overlap in these categories. All right, so what about their experiences in the schools? So this is kind of going to give you a flashback to the full report that I presented in May. Just going to give you a couple of highlights. So I'll walk through a couple of survey items for relationships with teachers and counselors, inclusive climates in classrooms, feelings of safety, and then sort of measures that some people might call validation, and then victimization. So for each of these, I'm going to show you two graphs. The graph on top is breaking it down for LGB versus non-LGB, and the bottom graph is going to be male, female, and non-binary. So sexual orientation on top, gender identity on the bottom. And they're going to be the same items, so you can just look up and down. So in the first one, there are 3 different survey items. The first one says, are you comfortable talking with teachers about problems? So this is saying that 74%, 3/4 of non-LGB students say, yes, I feel comfortable talking to teachers about problems, but only 50% of LGB students. On the next measure, I trust my teachers. Again, it's much higher for non-LGB students than LGB students. And on the last one, I'm comfortable talking with a counselor. So similar item to the first one with teachers, but now it's the role of a counselor. Some people might expect that to be higher, given that that's a substantial portion of counselor's role, potentially. But again, we see similar discrepancies between LGB and non-LGB students in comfort talking with counselors. If you drop down to the bottom graph, so it's the same 3 items, what you see here are very dramatic differences. You know, sometimes on the order of half as many non-binary students reporting positive experiences, comfortable talking with their teachers, comfortable talking with a counselor, I trust my teachers. Overall, there's sort of 2 things to take away from this. One, these are very large discrepancies, very large differences. The second is that they're very low, even if you just look at them and say, well, some of these numbers are hovering around 50%, either above or below. That's meaning only 1 in 2 of these students is saying they're having these kinds of positive experiences. That just by itself is very concerning. All right, so moving on to inclusive climates and classrooms. Again, on the top, we're looking at LGB versus non-LGB. And then on the bottom, we're looking at gender identity. And so what we see here is the first question says, students respect differences. So this is asking the students to report on whether other students in their school respect people's differences. And what this is saying is that 71% of non-LGB students say, yes, other students in my school respect students' differences. But again, only 49% of LGB students report that they think that is true. The second item is I feel like I belong. This is a very classic social belonging measure. We all know that social belonging and feeling connected to school is very important for students' outcomes. We see a 20 percentage point difference here between LGB and non-LGB students. And the last item that we're having here is my contributions are valued. So this is an inclusive classroom measure. So you want the students clearly to be thinking that, when they raise their hand in class, when they have something to say, their contributions are valued. And we see a similar pattern here where 3/4 of non-LGB students say yes, I think that's true, but only a little bit above 50% of LGB students say that's true. So if you drop down and look at gender identity, you see very similar patterns. The most disturbing thing I think maybe potentially in this graph is that none of the items reach 50% for non-binary gender identified students. So not 50%, less than 50% say students respect differences, I feel like I belong, and my contributions are valued. What about feelings of safety? So I don't know if you remember, but these were some of the more alarming and sort of surprisingly low numbers. So I'll remind you that these items ask about how frequently do you feel safe in different places in the school, like the classroom, the hallway, etc. And it's important to remember that because what we're reporting here is the percentage that say they always feel safe. Okay? That's different than some measures that say, have you ever felt not safe? Or no, that's the same as ours. Sorry, this is the end of a long day. I gave a presentation to the police force this morning at 8 o'clock, so that was like 12 hours ago, on a different topic. And I told Steve already, you guys are a much better audience. So our measure is a measure that you're going to get higher rates of people saying ever, right? Because say 1 day or 2 days they felt unsafe, right? We code it that way and we ask the question that way because we think that the goal should be for students to feel safe 100% of the time. They should always report that they feel safe. So that's why we report it this way. All right, so first measure is I feel safe in hallways and bathrooms. The second is I feel safe in classrooms. These two items are similar. They're just asking about different places within the school environment. They have similar sort of discrepancies. They're very large. They're almost twice as high for non-LGB students versus LGB. And the last one is a question asking about their perception of the school environment. Is your school welcoming and safe? Here, higher rates of people saying yes, so they're over 50%. That's great, but you still see a large disparity. If you drop down to see non-binary, this is where some of these percentages get drastically low. If you have less than 1 in 4 students, for this first one that says 21%, you have less than 1 in 4 students that are non-binary gender identified saying they feel safe in hallways and bathrooms in their school. That's pretty shockingly low. So still only 30% say they feel safe all the time in their classrooms, and only 53% of them say their school is welcoming and safe. So last bit of survey data from LGB students. This is showing you 2 different items. So the first one is asking you on the left-hand side, opportunities to talk about sexual orientation. 31% of LGB students say yes, that's true. And 88% of them say they've heard hurtful comments about sexual orientation. Very high. Then if we look at the non-binary identified students, their question that we're putting here is, do you have opportunities to talk about transgender identity? And 28% of them are saying yes. And then fully 86% of them are saying they've heard hurtful comments about gender. So that was a flashback to the student survey results. Now I'm going to sort of go into the third part of the policy brief, and it's really where the heart of the policy brief is. That's why we call this a policy brief and not a report. So the student survey report just did that. It just collects the data, analyzes the data, gives you the general trends, and presents that to you. The difference for a policy brief is that we look into the education policy literature and the sort of evaluation literature and say, what are other districts doing? And have they evaluated those efforts? And is there any evidence that they've actually made a difference? Is there any change or movement that they think is either related to or caused by these interventions? First thing I will say is this is a sort of smaller body of literature than what we've looked at for you in the past. When we looked at disciplinary climate in general, when we looked at sort of racial disproportionalities and disparities in general in feeling safe or feeling included in classrooms. That's a much larger body of literature because that's an area that people have been researching for a longer period of time. So one thing that I would say about this is there is literature out there and we gleaned what we could find from it, but it is a smaller body of literature and so there is less robust evidence. So what I am presenting to you here is the best evidence and it's sort of a summary of what we consider the best evidence. Make sense? All right, so we identified 4 general strategies that a lot of schools and districts have taken. This first graph or table shows you the first 2, and it summarizes for you in a table format when things have increased or gone down using this strategy. So the first strategy says anti-bullying policies, and it says including references to sexual orientation and gender identity. So it's not just the existence of having anti-bullying policies. Almost all schools and all districts have these now. It's actually including specific references to gender identity and sexual orientation. When schools do that, it on average increases, so an up arrow means gets better, increases feelings of safety at school for LGBT students, sense of belonging, makes them more likely to talk to staff when they have a problem, and it decreases the rates of victimization and bullying that these students face. The second strategy that a lot of schools and districts take, including your own, is to have GSAs, or LGBTQ student groups of some type. This is the most common type, the kind you have in your district. It's a general sort of way to organize student groups in different places. They look different, so they're not identical in all places. This is where the most literature is. This is where the most evidence is. This is one of the most common strategies used by districts. Here you see increasing levels of feelings of physical and emotional safety, overall psychological well-being being increased, a bunch of positive academic outcomes like academic attendance, having high school students be more likely to attend college, having better relationships with teacher, more positive school climate in general, better sense of social belonging and connectedness with school, and also a reduction in them hearing hurtful speech, being harassed and victimized, depression, and substance abuse issues. The last 2 intervention strategies that we saw used commonly in other places were having more inclusive curriculum and doing different types of professional development for teachers and staff. So for both of these, you can tell they're sort of large pots, right? There's lots of ways you could change the curriculum and make it more inclusive. There's lots of ways you could use professional development to train teachers or staff. We've lumped them all together, so if you want to know the specifics about them, then we kind of have to read into the fine details of the differences between the studies. So for inclusive curriculum, the benefits or the things that have been correlated with these changes in policies are increasing feelings of safety, inclusion, academic motivations, academic achievement, and increased mental health outcomes for LGBT students, and a decline in them saying that they hear hurtful comments. Using professional development models, most of them look at things like educating educators about LGBTQ issues. These have been found to increase educator understanding of gender and sexual orientation issues, and also to sort of increase their use or knowledge of strategies to de-escalate LGBT-related bullying. So then the final part of the report brings together what we found in your district from the student data and what we gleaned from the research literature on education policy changes in different districts. We bring these together to make general recommendations. So the first one around anti-bullying policies, including references to sexual orientation and gender identity, the basic principle here is to increase the visibility of these policies. So visibility is something that's very important. So the more visible these policies are, visible in terms of physical location, visible in terms of staff and faculty or teachers mentioning them and using them, is what makes them effective. So if you have it, but it's not seen, people don't know about it, it's not effective. So the increased visibility is something that people have really pointed to say that's the most important component of having these policies to make them effective. The second recommendation about the LGBTQ student groups is, one, to continue to support the groups you already have. This is an initiative you already have in the district. And to bolster the efforts to increase their visibility, because again, in the literature looking at these student groups, one of the key aspects that they've pointed to in places where they're more effective is that they're more highly visible in the school. The third recommendation about inclusive curriculum, it's sort of a twofold one. On the one hand, you can create a more inclusive curriculum by integrating new material into your existing curriculum. On the other hand, you can create new curriculum or use new curriculum. So we're sort of saying you could do either one of these to get more inclusive curriculum. The last one is professional development. So providing opportunities for teachers, staff, and administrators on topics related to LGBTQ identity, experiences, and inclusion. So these recommendations are all very broad or sort of general, and that's on purpose because I don't know if you remember, but last summer when we did a series of policy briefs for you, we did a similar thing where we looked through the literature, we found what worked in other districts, and we made general recommendations as to how the district may want to move forward. We did that so that that could be used, those documents could be used, and those general recommendations and background knowledge could be used in the decision-making process that you all have. Our recommendation at that point was to create a multi-stakeholder task force that would allow for different stakeholders, teachers, students, community members, different organizations to be represented and have their voices heard to help prioritize the recommendation, to help flesh out what people think would work best in the Iowa City School District, not just look at the national data and what's worked in other places. So, in terms of next steps, we would again recommend going through this similar process because from our vantage point, it looked rather successful. We thought the policy briefs were taken very seriously. They were used by the task force. We presented the task force report here. That was part of the reason why you all implemented a couple of the initiatives that you're piloting that we're evaluating for you. So I think that the general process of going through this, of having community input, is a very positive thing. It was also one of the things that people on the task force last year said that they hoped continued. They told us over and over again that they were very happy and thankful to be part of the process, the decision-making process, and not just to be told what the decision was after it was made. The last two, so based on the recommendations of the task force, we hope that once they meet, if you choose to think that's a good idea, that you would sort of follow their recommendations and try something, either pilot a new thing at some selected schools, or if you don't try a new thing, to bolster some of the efforts that you're already doing. And then, of course, given that we're Public Policy Center researchers, we think that any time you're trying initiatives and you want to know if they work, we're big on data analysis, doing evaluations and assessing what's happening. Because otherwise, you don't know what happened and you don't know whether it worked or it didn't work. That's it.
So Sarah, is there anything you need from us tonight? I think you summed it up really well. If you go back to that slide, I mean, we've done this kind of a bunch of times, establishing a task force, which I think we've already agreed to do, right, Steve? And getting the right folks involved and come back with a detailed recommendation, then we'd look forward to the detailed recommendation. I mean, I think our job is policy level, which we've done. It's just support the work which we've done, support the task force, create the environment for this to happen, right? Mm-hmm. I think you're right. We've had some great success, and we just need to keep that up. So is there anything you need from us tonight, Steve, or?
No, we're already, we presumed that the next step was to move forward with this process, so that we're already underway with that.
Any questions tonight, or we let the task force do their work? Sarah, I want to say thank you again. I mean, it's great work. It's always very concise and crisp, and you get down to the recommendations and next steps, and it's just really clear. And the only thing I'll say as a district is we just need to continue to be brave and go get the data. And it's okay, whatever comes back, and then that's how you drive improvement, right? So, I mean, it's an opportunity in society, work, school. So thanks for just driving this very important work. That's a key part of our equity plan, so.
Can I ask a quick question? More of Steve, I think. According to the report, we have LGBTQ groups at all our secondary schools. maybe some more active, some less active. I guess I just wonder, do they have faculty advisors?
They
And
do,
You
yes.
know, so I mean, I guess I'm wondering, even if the group might not be active, if the teacher was out there just once a month saying, well, there's going to be this meeting, you know, put up a poster or two to make sure that the thing doesn't just fall into inactivity.
And one of the things that we discovered was that membership ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And they shared that with us when we talked to them about that. And I think, as you said, and it goes back to the visibility issue, that was one of the things that came up. We found that teachers that were more active in promoting simply gathering, not necessarily activities, but my room's a safe place to come to. I'm the host for this gathering. The more active they were in promoting that, the more likely it was to have a robust group, regardless of whether the number of students at the school fluctuated.
One other quick suggestion maybe would be, you talk in terms of teachers and counselors as receiving PD or being models, and I wonder if, I'm not sure it changes it that much, but to add coaches to that list might be a useful, I mean, I think a lot of kids are as likely to model themselves after a coach as they are after a teacher. Now, a lot of the coaches are teachers, so maybe they get the PD anyway, but, you know, to have special emphasis on that could be useful. That's all.
Yeah, and I had just a couple of quick ones too. Since we had our discussion on cyber citizenship and everything that way, and the importance of policies reflecting those things, I'm assuming we've got that entered in with everything we're doing with that, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation, harassment's harassment, bullying's bullying, you know, whether it's
Right.
sexual orientation, race, you know, religious preference, you know, whatever that is. So we're definitely talking about all those different topics.
But you brought up the importance of the fact that it's in policy and everything that way, so fantastic. Also, your last 3 or 4 slides, I know you were consolidating stuff from in here. Could you provide those with, no, I'm just saying, I didn't see them as part of the.
Oh, yeah.
could you
No,
just
they're in
provide-
text. I
Well,
made them
understand. It was
into
a very
fancy
good one.
tables for the presentation.
Right, it's a very good one, but if you could just
Sure.
provide, they're a quick.
Sure. Yeah, reference.
Reference
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
us. I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
All right, moving forward in operational work, we'll need to be mindful of time as we go here, so I'll check what we need to get done on each one. But next item on the agenda is the School Infrastructure Bond Series 217B. And Craig, this is continuation of a plan we've already approved. Is there anything we need to review tonight?
We have Suzanne from PFM just give you the details of this particular sale. But yes, it's something that you've experienced before, and it's the continuation and the final piece of funding our facility master plan. This is the first section of it. Suzanne, go ahead.
Suzanne Gerlach, Senior Managing Consultant with PFM Financial Advisors. As Craig alluded to, on Monday, June 26th, the district received bids for, I would say, phase 3 of the last portion of the financing that will be done from the SAVE fund. So we priced $21,200,000 of school infrastructure, sales services, and use tax revenue bonds, and this is the Series 2017B. We received 9 bids from 5 firms, with the winning bid received from Key Government Finance out of Superior, Colorado, with an interest rate of 2.38%,
Wow.
which I was very pleased with. That's actually even a little bit lower than where we were able to price the 2017A in January.
Smiling and really happy right now. It's
Excellent interest rate.
Uh-huh.
I will say that, so our approach to this financing was a little unique in that we broke it up into 3 different phases of financing. We were trying to make sure we weren't borrowing the money before we needed to spend it for construction. And so we got creative and offered the bank qualified issuance in December, and then came back with the non-BQ right away in January to fund sort of the spring construction season. And now this is just the final phase to kind of pay for the summer and fall construction for the projects that are already in underway. Let's see. Yeah, and I would say that, you know, based on the bids for this final $21 million, that was obviously the right approach, and this is definitely proven to be an economical and prudent way to use the district's saved dollars.
Your estimate was what? Versus the 2.3?
I think we started at 3%, just to
Yeah.
be conservative, because rates had started to rise early in the year, And then in the market, we've seen rates decline over the last, I think, 20 basis points just over the last 2 weeks. And then right before we locked in rates, and to receive 9 different bids from 5 bidders for a direct bank loan, that's tremendous.
So order of magnitude, what's the savings on 3% versus 2.3?
That's a good question, and
You can get back to us on
yeah,
that,
I
but
have
it's
to
a
get
lot.
back to you. I don't have the original numbers.
It's
I
not
have
a
what-
small number.
No, it's not a small number at all.
You can get back to us on that, Craig.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, on a cash flow basis, I want to say it had like $500,000 impact in the next 2 fiscal years. So that's the kind of savings we're talking about, if memory serves.
And what factors contribute to, and maybe this is more for you, Craig, what factors contribute to us receiving 9 bids and receiving a 2.39% interest rate? I mean, there's got to be factors, things that we're doing here that bring those numbers out, both in quantity and quality.
One of the things, I believe it's a process we used as far as just going direct to the banks, and the size of the issue is really something that investors or the clearinghouses are very interested in. We chunked it up into these smaller amounts and made the one bank qualified under the 10 million, and then the other 2 allows us to bring more bidders into the system. And I think this is the first time we've worked with this particular bank vendor. So it just shows you that we do take the low bid, and we really benefit from this competition. So,
And I will say there is kind of a credit package that goes out when we we used an entity to kind of be our mediary with these bankers. And so there's a credit package that does go out, and obviously this district is rated AAA for general obligation purposes.
Right.
And even though these aren't general obligation bonds, that speaks to the credit worthiness of the district, absolutely.
Right.
And so even though this is a revenue stream, it still speaks to the underlying credit and the reliability and the prudent use of your saved dollars.
I think it's a great point, because everything about the facilities master plan is very intentional. We've had it, I mean,
Very
market conditions are great, no better time to do it than now. But we've had a very clear strategy on the borrowing and a very clear strategy on the financial front to make sure we're in good financial position to get the best rate possible, so.
and as you know, we only we have over a 125% coverage, or we only borrow 75% of our revenue stream. Which just adds to that comfort when bidders come in and look at this debt. Okay. So,
and that's what I was getting at, was that the general obligation AAA bond rating is nothing to sniff at. That's impressive. It's impressive. We're a solid investment. It's the highest rating.
Well, highest possible credit rating.
It's outstanding.
Yes.
So my question in all these operational discussions will be, what happens if it fails? Like, we won't complete Longfellow would be one answer, right? You wouldn't do West Phase 1 and all that other good stuff, right?
Nothing good.
Yeah. That's going to be a theme you're going to hear from me. What happens if you don't pass it? Okay, thank you. I'd entertain further questions. Entertain a motion. There's a suggested motion in the... Yep.
Yes, there is a suggested motion, and please make sure that the motion includes all resolutions provided in the... that's what the legal attorney needs to, or legal bond counsel needs to have.
Would I actually have to specifically list?
It's up top. It's right in the recommended action, so please just read that.
Got it. Wow. Make sure I'm getting this right. This is a lot of pressure. I move that we approve the resolution I hope I'm saying this. Am I seeing this right? Yeah.
Is it acceptable if it just says, as written here, listed in the cover memo?
Okay, that's what I'm staggering over here. I don't want to mess this up. Whew. I move that we approve the resolutions provided in the cover memo and board documents for the sale of $21,200,000 of school infrastructure sales, service, and use tax revenue bonds, Series 2017B.
Is there a second? Second. Further discussion? Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kristen. Great. Thanks, Greg. That's amazing. Anything else you need from us?
Nope.
All right, next item is transportation, new bus routes. Greg?
All right, the board had requested a report on the routes that we're projecting for the 17-18 school year. I provided you a little bit more data than that. I went back to 15-16. I provided a comparison with the 16-17 and then 17-18. And then at the bottom of the report, just kind of gave you a bullet as to some of the changes that took place that made some of the changes in the number of routes and the costs and so forth, the justification of why those changed. Also, I provided you with a 5-year cost comparison with a peer group, a selected peer group of schools, and you can see how our costs, operational costs, compare with those peer group schools as well. You can see that our cost per student is on the lower side of those UEN peer group schools. And one of the reasons for that has been our ability to tier buses. And what we mean by that is we take a secondary route and pair it with an elementary route, and we call it one route for cost purposes. Even though they're running 2 different routes, we're able to, under our Durham contract and the amount of time that we dedicate for those drivers, we're able to consider that one route for cost purposes. That's why you see at the bottom of the report, let's take fiscal year 18 projected, for instance. We're projecting 126 routes, okay, but only 84 buses. Well, it's because we are able to tier those buses. Last year, we had 136 routes and 84 buses. One of the reasons why we're projecting the same number of buses this year as last year is because you can see in there that we're taking a significant number of secondary routes out of the system, and that's because of opening up Liberty High School. West, for instance, won't have 14 buses next year. We're taking 7 away from that campus, which will be a delight for those who try to get in and out of the parking lot at the time that the buses are there. Also, City is losing, I think, 3 buses. The junior high is losing 2 buses on the east side. So what we're up against is that since we're losing secondary routes, we don't have as many to pair with the elementary. And so we're projecting actually a cost increase for fiscal year 2018. We're projecting our cost per mile to go up, and we're also projecting the number of buses to remain fairly static, even though the number of routes has decreased because of our secondary, carrying less secondary students. So with that, keep it short and brief and let you ask any questions you may have.
But it's only up because you added service, right? Okay, I just want to make sure that was clear.
These are, the fiscal 17 numbers are still in process at this time. They're not firm, of course. We won't know all the accruals on those until the end of August. And then this is a work in progress right now with Durham. Just got the numbers. As you saw, we had to update the report even after Kim had posted it on Tuesday because I got the fiscal year 18 numbers that day, and it's still a work in progress. We do have, as of today, 126 pay-to-ride applications for students, and we were able to accommodate all of those students in this routing structure, except for 22 Liberty High School students, and we're still waiting for some data back from the Kirkwood area students in order to finish those routes. And so Scott Kibbe Esme Davis are working through that process with those parents and communicating with them. And we've contacted all the pay-to-ride parents and have given them an update on their status. So,
I apologize, Craig, I missed it. It was 182 on the pay-to-ride students?
126.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So in other words, you expect to have a route for those Kirkwood students, you just...
Right now, we're wondering if we're missing about a busload of kids that haven't responded back to us whether they're going to ride or need a ride yet. And so we're systematically working through trying to contact those parents and trying to get an answer of yes or no. And so that's where we're at right now. But
And is that for activity busing?
no,
So this is just for busing to school?
correct.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious about the change from 15-16 to 16-17. So in 15-16 to 16-17, we cut all that discretionary busing, and yes, we added some of it back. And we changed the bell schedule, which was supposed to save us a little bit of money. I think we were talking about $100,000 at the time. And yet the number only went down by 88. So I kind of wonder what happened there.
Costs go up under our Durham contract. The route costs go up each year. Fuel costs go up. There's a lot of factors that go into that.
Do we know, I'm always kind of curious about, relative to what we cut, how much we added back in terms of attendance support, busing. I don't know if you're the right guy to ask that question to.
We can generate that information for you.
Well, and the activity busing and.
Well, that doesn't start till the next year, though.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 meetings ago in that June document.
So Craig, I just wanted to say, if you go back to, so if you look at the peak, right, 2012, almost 3.8 million.
Right.
So, and then you look at 4 or 5 years later, it's almost 1.4 million lower.
Right.
And as you said, it's not only 1.4 lower, but you also had to offset 4 years of inflation, right? So,
yep.
I mean, there's a series of tough decisions there. But to me, when you get around 1.4 million, you're talking 17 to 18 teachers. It depends what you want to use for the fully loaded wage rate. But anyway, I'm just back to when we talked about meeting the class size goals versus 2012 to now, we offset 4 years of inflation and reduced $1.4 million and put 17 to 18 more teachers back in the classroom. So it's part of the tough decisions to deliver the results we just saw, like with the RAM. I think the RAM, we moved like 9 teachers, just like order of magnitude, something like that. So, I mean, 18 teachers is a lot, so it's a big deal.
It's a significant reduction in transportation costs, and we're just really tickled that, we can roll that back into more, the other aspects of why we're here, education process.
All right, anything else for tonight? I'm sure there will be lots of future busing conversations around.
I'm sure there will.
I have a couple questions, if I may. How many of the buses going into Liberty are from the Kirkwood area versus North Liberty kids?
I think Esme told me 3 right now.
Okay, I only see that there's 3 buses. So they're all Kirkwood students?
Well, from that area. I think it's a building, isn't it a building by building?
It's up on the street.
What's the Kirkwood?
I see only 3 buses going, unless?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So all 3 of those are Kirkwood. So
Yeah.
without the Kirkwood students, there would be no busing into Liberty.
What do we have for Liberty? 3 buses and 2 special ed buses. I can't tell you where those buses are out of, Lori. I'll have to get that information for you. I don't.
Okay, and I'd be interested in the same information for Alexander to West. And then my other question is, the information that we got, I believe in June, indicated that we were still doing secondary discretionary busing. I'm wondering how many of the buses, I think, is it just to Northwest? I'm not sure. But I'm wondering how many of these buses are discretionary.
We can pull that data for you too.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, any other questions? All right, thanks, Craig.
Sure.
Moving on to the Hoover infrastructure preparation process. Steve? Looks like Amy.
It's going to be Amy and Chris here. So there you are. Your handouts are ready to go. Yep.
All right, so there's several of us that are going to speak to this tonight. We've got Dwayne, our friend over there as well. We provided a lot of documents in board docs, kind of a running document that we're going to speak off of, but essentially we're going to talk about New Hoover, Longfellow's transition, as well as Longfellow's renovation, and then the excitement of opening up a new building coming here in a few weeks. So just starting with kind of the overall process, when Becky Furlong was here, she put together a large group that would help with this transition, as this is a unique situation that we're using this building as a transitional schoolhouse this coming year, and with the passage of the bond, should that go through next year as well, and then it will open up as its own building in 2019. So with that large group then, again, Becky started in May of 2015, I believe. She pulled together communities of Hoover, Lemmy, Lincoln, Longfellow, Lucas, and Mann, and had representatives on there. The purpose of the committee was then to communicate discussion of that committee back to parents and teachers, think about what kinds of questions need to be answered, think about the things that Becky would need to take then to Superintendent Murley. So that started as Becky then transitioned out. I picked up the committee midway through the 15-16 school year, and then I've also worked with this committee this past year. Really, our focus this past year was twofold. We broke into a smaller committee, full well knowing that we needed a smaller group to work on the more finer details of not only transitioning into the new Hoover building, but on things like communication with our parents there, the facilities piece with Dwayne in mind, the transportation piece, working with Kristen on the website. So there's lots of things that smaller group just went to task with. You can see that we are meeting on a monthly basis in the other document that I refer to. I feel like the process has gone well by using that large group to also then share the work of the small group and get their feedback. Largely that large group then this year took a tour of the building both in the spring and fall. We took our first initial communication to them for feedback that we wanted to get out to Longfellow families that were detailing several things about the move, what that timeline was going to look like. We purposefully split those first letters into if they would be receiving busing in the new situation or not receiving busing, and how they could access pay-to-ride. So we used that large group to kind of banter back and forth with. We also talked to them about the bond, the facilities master plan, and then how those other communities were going to be impacted in the long term by that new Hoover building. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Chris and let him, transition to Dwayne and let him talk a little bit next about the construction on the new Hoover building, timeline and progress.
Thank you. I was out there yet this afternoon, and it's looking pretty good. On the outside, some of the finish grading is taking place. They're getting ready to put down sod and seed. Playgrounds are in. They still need to do the softball around the playgrounds, but it's looking pretty good. They still have some roof flashings to finish, but just minor details. On the inside of the building, classrooms are ready. Media center's ready. They're looking pretty good. They're still working in some of the corridors, kind of working their way back out the front entrance, and even the front entrance a week ago looked pretty rough, but it looked pretty good today. The painters are touching up. They're doing touch-up work on some of the cabinets and the countertops and things like that. They're painting the stairwell today, getting ready to put up some of the balusters. But all in all, I was fairly pleased. What we have left to do out there is to make sure all the systems are balanced and they're working properly. And that's an ongoing process, but it's ready. The furniture is scheduled to be delivered, I think, after the 10th of August. We held it off deliberately so that we wouldn't have people on top of folks. If you're late back to Alexander, we had a much more compressed timeline there. Same contractor, same size school, same conditions, except that it was right up to the wire. We had a lot of people on top of each other. So this time we're trying to get the building done, back out, so the teachers and staff can come in while we're assembling the furniture and putting the building together, and it's going much smoother.
Talk next a little bit about the ongoing work with the city of Iowa City.
Yeah, well, you've had Amy and Chris have both had a lot of communication with the city about lowering the traffic the speed limit out there, and they've agreed to do that, and I think they've agreed to move a crossing guard from another part of town. And just as of today, or late yesterday, one of the city traffic engineers has asked if we can look at the bank on the upside from the intersection. So if you go to Barrington and American Legion Road and head east, on the east side of Barrington Road, the terrain actually goes up. And we have an easement there to make some changes. And so we're going to meet tomorrow, Thursday, and see if we can change that grade just a little bit so that when you come up Barrington Road, before you get to the intersection, you can see the traffic coming from the east or up the hill. So that's just as dangerous as the traffic coming from the west. So we're going to look at that. So I think the cities, they've tried to get involved and make some improvements out there. And I think due to the efforts of Amy and Chris, they've been on top of them.
Jump in.
I know it's getting late. I'll try not to put anybody to sleep. So just some of the ongoing work that we've done with the city to kind of piggyback off of what Dwayne shared. We've been working with the city and our PTA at Longfellow going back to early this winter. Huge thanks to Ron Kanucky and Scott Sovers and all their work coming out with Craig and Esme, being a part of our PTA meetings and collecting questions and concerns from our families and trying to find solutions for those pieces. Coming back to some of the small group work that we were doing with that committee, some of the ordering and detailed things that we've done at the building. A lot of credit to Dwayne and to Dennis Harnick, the principal over at Hoover, who eventually will be out at Hoover Elementary. Even Celeste Chopa coming and giving her perspective on opening up a new building, helping us through that process. Tammy Woodring. So just, all of the detailed things from Dwayne picking up the garbage cans to Dennis ordering the desks and furniture for the classrooms. There's been a lot through that process. Obviously, there's some things that we're going to be bringing over as well. We've worked with Physical Plant to get the things over from Longfellow that we need, and then we'll kind of reevaluate here. As soon as Mann and Lincoln are done with the building, we'll go ahead and take a look at what we need to do moving the new group of Hoover students in. Kind of moving forward into the Longfellow renovations. This process was really new to me and very exciting. About a little bit more than a year ago, Dwayne and I first sat down with BCDM, the architects, and who are out of Omaha, and we had Rohrbach Associates who are here out of Iowa City. We were fortunate, from my perspective anyway, that Will Downing is one of the architects there. He's also a Longfellow parent. He knows the building and the community really well. So I think we had a little bit of an advantage there. I came into that first meeting kind of expecting, maybe we're going to get an elevator, get our HVAC redone, and hopefully get a new gym or something like that where we could spread things out a little bit. We come back a month later and find out we're going to build an entire new fine arts wing in addition to all those other pieces. So huge credit to Dwayne and that group for putting that all together. It's pretty exciting. DD was completed by the end of October. That time we got some renovation renderings. We were provided floor plans, interior renderings, exterior elevations for the projects, things like that. We worked to communicate those with kind of all of our stakeholders, neighborhood association, again, come back to our PTA. Even our second grade students were really excited to see that slideshow when we went through it with them in the gym. So it was a lot of fun. As far as a little bit of an update for right now, the demolition started pretty much as soon as school got out. Still going on. You can see through the floor on the second floor there. So I made sure I asked Dwayne where I can step and not step. Rob and that team out at Larson, they're making pretty quick work of it. They've already got some walls going up inside, and we were out a little over a week ago trying to measure out smart boards and things like that. So really excited about that. Kristen Peterson, again, a huge thank you to you putting together the website. There's a lot of information on there if you get a chance to go to the Longfellow site. Renovation and transition updates, information about both buildings, a lot of pictures out there, and a lot of description of what's going on throughout the process. And then just you know, our families and our staff have been absolutely fabulous as far as this transition is concerned. We've tried really hard. Amy's done a great job helping us communicate with families, community members. Again, the Longfellow website, but also, you know, school newsletters, more formal communication like the letters that have been sent out. We sent out some Blackboard Connect information these last couple of months. PTA has been wonderful as far as setting some time aside. We've met, you know, kind of giving an update every month, but also set some significant time aside to be able to share the progress at the new Hoover building, to share progress on the Longfellow, the plans for Longfellow, and also just to be able to invite transportation out and the city out to come and talk to our parents about what that process will look like for next year, bus stops and things like that in the neighborhood where we're not so used to that just yet. Our before and after, wait a second. Packing and unpacking at Longfellow, you might be surprised to hear that after 100 years you collect quite a bit of stuff. And so Mike Lyden and Paul Dorman and Mike and Josh and all of our parent volunteers and staff, they did a great job of getting that out in a remarkably short amount of time. The things that are kind of on hold right now are being stored over at the old Hy-Vee, and will be coming out, like Dwayne said. I think we've got the 10th and the 11th slated to bring those things over to the new building for us. So looking forward to that. Our before and after school program, working collaboratively with the existing Hoover right now and trying to kind of buddy up for the summer, and then they'll be ready to go at the new site when everything opens up here in August. And then just a couple more pieces. The transportation piece, I know that we've been in communication recently about some of those concerns. Again, we went through district responsibilities. Esme Davis went through and kind of hand counted 180 students that qualified for busing and the 100 that do not for this coming year. Again, communicating with our Longfellow families, if you know, depending on which group they are a part of. And then, you know, kind of going from there. I don't know if Amy, at this point, if you have anything to add to that transportation piece, or
Just we're monitoring our PK and K numbers as registrations start to come in then in August for the additional kiddos that may or may not qualify on top of the 180 that we're talking about.
and then again, working hand in hand with the city and talking about their responsibilities. Just some of the big bullet points of trying to increase that safety over there. Would be the addition of the crossing guard, like Dwayne talked about, slowing the speed limit down between Scott and Taft to about 35 miles an hour, and then obviously in the school zone it'll be bumped down to 20. They'll be using radars, so you can kind of see what your speed is and a reminder to slow you down. Increased police presence as we start the school year, maintaining those the trails and things like that for kids to get to school safely. So quite a few things, and like Dwayne talked about earlier, getting that, trying to even improve what's already adequate sightline, but trying to improve that a little bit by looking at the grading out there. So, and then moving into attendance area development. As you know, back in 2016, those attendance areas that will go into effect for 1920 will be, you know, we worked on that back in 2016. Those changes will impact some of our parents, obviously, so we made sure that we communicated that directly to those families. And we also just threw in the piece about voluntary transfers and reminded families that as far as our fifth graders are concerned, when they come back, the fifth graders that come back in 18-19, they'll be offered kind of that capstone year, so they'd be able to stay at Longfellow for their sixth grade year. And then families of kindergarten through fourth grade students that year, obviously they can apply for that voluntary transfer if that's a desire of theirs. So I'll pass things back to Amy.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. So we are due to take occupancy on August 1st. Of course, Dwayne's going to be working closely with them on that. I know there'll be a few loose ends to tie up.
No problem. I would add to the comments about the Longfellow project, it's not a safe place to be right now, but it looks great. You know, I mean, all the demo work, you have to destruct a building like that before you construct it. And that's what's been taking place out there. And I mean, semi-loads of trash and plaster and concrete have been taken out of that building. But the good news is they've also started rebuilding. So there's classroom walls that are going up. They're starting to look at doing some of the electrical work and get some of the infrastructure work in the building. They've started on some of the footings for the additions out there as well. They're working on the parking lot. We found some bad soil, surprise, surprise, on about a fourth of it. So we're have to dig it out and recompact it. But the Longfellow project is moving really well. And as soon as we can get people in there safely, I think we'd probably have your staff come take a look. I know they enjoyed touring Hoover, but Longfellow will be, I think, really exciting for them. I know I saw one of your teachers sitting there. She's still there. And they're excited about it, so it's going well.
So then come August 21st, we'll have the ribbon cutting ceremony for the new Hoover building. Both Dennis Harnick and Chris Pizarnik will be present for that as well. We've bumped up their time for ice cream social so that when parents are there, hopefully to see the ribbon cutting, that they can just flow right into the Longfellow ice cream social. I think the rest of the district is scheduled for 5:30 that night. And of course, we'll be welcoming students officially on the 23rd. So with that, we would entertain questions.
So originally I asked for this topic to be put on the agenda with some questions. Before I get into those, just Chris, can you clarify for us? There was an article in the paper the other day that said you were going to have how many?
330.
Thank you. Yeah. So it was 100 more students than was reported.
What was the question?
Well, in the newspaper article in the Press Citizen, it said there was only going to be 230 students there or something next year for Longfellow, but I wanted to clarify it, make sure that everyone knew it was 300 and whatever.
Yep,
You just
330
said,
plus
330.
pre-K.
Secondly, when I was at the farmer's market this weekend, I was able to show some people that, some Longfellow parents, the pictures that were in the board packet, and they really appreciated seeing the inside of the building and what's happening. They said they've been able to see some of the dust and smoke coming from out of there, but to see the work on the inside there makes them a little bit more excited what's happening there.
And Kristen just uploaded some more of those this afternoon to the website too, so hopefully people will be able to access them pretty easily.
Perfect. And then finally, the reason I brought this up, and I talked with Steve a little bit about this, is that I think we have a great relationship with the city. They're very excited about working with us with things like MAN. I'd like to see that excitement maybe get tweaked, just turned up a little bit more pressure on them to get the sidewalks in. Some of those things, I know it's they have it planned out in their timeline, but there's a chance that this board may be having a discussion should the bond not pass that school opens as a school in 2018. And if that has to happen, I would really like to see students be able to get there safely and have walkways and speed reductions and everything that has to happen there. So I just wanted, as a personal note, I just want to make sure that we're focusing on trying to maybe keep on the city on that to try and push that timeline up.
What's the city telling us right now about how soon there will be a walkway under the road?
Yeah, so 2020 is when they're slated to start that project right now. So there'd be a bike path put in on one side of the road, a sidewalk on the other side. I think there'd be widening of the road and resurfacing.
Completed by the 2021 school year?
The funding source doesn't start until 2020, so actually we'd be opening in the 1920 year without that piece.
But would it be in place
started.
for the 2021 year? Is that the idea?
That part, I don't know the finish date on there, Chris, but
I believe their goal is a 1-year turnaround on that.
A little smaller question, just a related. I couldn't. Maybe it's in there. I'm sorry if it is. When Longfellow is using New Hoover as their swing school, would it be possible? I mean, are there currently any crossing guards that serve Longfellow that could then be shifted out there for that year at least?
No,
you don't have any.
We don't. No,
okay.
no.
We took one from. They're already providing one there. Yeah.
But it'd be better if it was just one to bring over. But I guess they already looked at that.
I'll be out there on Wednesdays probably.
And one other piece is not only the underpass and sidewalks, but trying to get and I don't know if it's in the city plan. Maybe Steve, you can tell me, is a sidewalk that connects Sunrise and Modern Manor, I believe it is, up to American Legion?
That I don't know when that's in the plan.
Because that's the thing, I think that's another thing that we should try and ask for as well.
I guess I have another question that's a little bit further off in time, but when most of Longfellow then returns to Longfellow at the end of their stay out there and the attendance zone changes, you're going to be trading out kids on buses for kids, probably a lot of them riding by car. And is there any preparations being made for an increased number of cars arriving?
You don't have a lot of kids bus right now, do you?
No. Yeah, right now we've got, this past school year, we had one school bus that came from the Windsor Ridge area. So, that was approximately 50, 60 students that rode fairly regularly on that. There are some things within the site plan that I think will increase help improve the flow of traffic there, and help that move fairly quickly. But that's kind of where we're at with that piece right now.
Well, there's some significant improvements in the site plan to allow flow, right? I mean, you don't need to go into too much detail, but I mean, that is site plan greatly enables.
Oh, it's greatly improved. You're asking about Longfellow?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the whole new parking lot on the east side also creates a place for a parent drop-off and buses over there that we're giving up on the west side, but I think in the end, it's an improved product.
All right, Amy, Chris, Dwayne, thank you. It's very exciting, awesome. Can't wait till the 21st to check it out, so I'll see you there. All right, with that, it's 9:04. We got Appendix 9 and 13 consent items to address, so let's be concise. So Dwayne, how about the highlights? Appendix 9.
Yes, we have 4 projects with 5 approvals. The first one is Step 8 change order for $924 at the softball field being done at Van Allen. We'd like to add that was for adding fencing at the end of a dead-end street. That was a request of the city to kind of discourage traffic from driving off the end of the street right onto the softball.
I mean, that's small.
Yeah. And then at Eastdale Transitions, a Step 9 substantial completion, which means that we can release the retained for $11,600. And then go ahead and accept the project, Step 10. At West High School, we have a Step 8 to change the design contract. And our original RFP, when we did that, was prior to the last revision to the facility master plan, in which we increased the budget from $7 to $13 million, basically. So this would be an addendum to change their contract fees based on their original 6.98%. So their contract fee would go from $535,000 to $953,000. And then on the kitchen equipment, we took bids. We solicited 3 or 4. We got 2 back. We got one of them. The low bid was $988,000, $639,000. The high was $1.1 million. So we're recommending the low bid into Great Lakes Hotel Supply. They're unfortunately out of Southfield, Michigan. The other bidder was from Cedar Rapids, Marion area. And at West High, Phase 2, Step 8, again to the design contract. We've had to kind of do the two together. Phase 1 and Phase 2 design work's been going on concurrently, so that we make sure everything works. So we're right now into the Phase 2, which obviously the project itself is dependent on the bond, but in order to start it next spring, if we're lucky enough to do that, the design work needs to be done. But there again, the project was increased from $13 million to $17 million, and based on their 6.98%, that increased from $994,500 to $1,314,000. Does that answer any questions you might have?
Entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Appendix 9 approvals as presented.
Is there a second?
I have a quick question.
There's a motion on the table.
Oh, I thought you seconded it. I'm
No,
sorry,
is there a
second.
Okay. Discussion.
Yeah, okay. So the West High with that $4 million increase, what, is that SAFE funds? I thought we had those all spoken for.
No, actually what we did was when we did the revised facility master plan, we moved a bunch of the infrastructure forward to Phase 1 from Phase 2. And we also reevaluated the overall scope and the value of the project when we made our recommendation to you. So it was shifting money into SAVE into Phase 1. We have it from Phase 2. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Well, let me make more clear. In the back of the building, We have to improve some natural gas lines. We have to increase the electrical service. We have to move some sewer lines, some water lines, and we also have to put in the base system for our heating and cooling that will feed phase 2, but needs to be done in phase 1 so that phase 1 can have air conditioning and heating. So we reevaluated what scope of the project should be in phase 1 and phase 2, and then we also increased it for inflation and additional scope when we made our recommendation back in January. So we actually started the design prior to that on phase 1. So that's why we're amending the contract now.
All right, further discussion? Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yay and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, thanks, Kristen. With 13 items to talk, we have about 2 minutes per item to finish by 10. So with that, we'll start with number 5. Let's try to be concise, and if there's a 30-second item, let's do it. So 5.
Yeah, this is quick, and I guess our IT guy is gone.
I'm sorry, but mine have already been renumbered. So this is Power School?
Power School, okay. Sorry.
Yep, Power School.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I just want to make sure I knew which one we're talking about.
Okay, so we are on the Power School one.
Yep.
I apologize, yeah.
They're up on the board too.
Good enough. Yes, my concern with this one is I have heard from staff concerns with the new Google-based system, Canvas, working with Power School, but I guess our IT guy is gone now. But if that can be relayed to him.
Yeah, we've been given confidence that Canvas for use at the high school does integrate with Power School, so we believe the two will talk to each other, but we know as we take on those new projects, there'll be some kinks we need to work out as we go through that, but Power School is what houses our student information system, all of our student data, parent portal.
All right, entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve item 1.
Second.
Which is Power School, just to clarify.
Yeah.
All right, Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Yes, and on the next one, on 7, I guess I'm the...
Next one's the early childhood.
Early childhood.
Oh, excuse me.
That was what I pulled. Okay, so I was just curious, last year we had this arrangement with HandyCare. Did we use all the slots that we had with HandyCare last year?
You know, I talked to Jay Beaver, and he said that we traditionally use all of our slots for our partner schools.
So we're expanding them quite a bit, which is great. How are we, what I want our families to know is that they can receive preschool for free, and they can have the wraparound care. They have to pay for it. But I want them to have that information so that they can get their kids there if they need preschool. How are we taking kids from the waiting list at, the various schools around these daycare centers and moving them into the preschool programs there?
Well, right now, we don't have a waiting list within our district. We only have 3 schools within our district that are full. So that's Alexander, Central, and Penn. So those students then can be moved to our other district preschools.
Okay, so like Penn, for example, practically next door to Frog Hollow.
Sure.
So do you have a plan for how you're going to notify the people on the waiting list?
Yeah, one of our secretaries for our preschool, she communicates with the parents and lets them know what the options are.
So, okay, I just want to make sure there's a formal communication, because we don't want anybody to go without preschool when we have the slots.
Exactly,
I'm
yep.
thrilled we have the slots. I want to make sure they get used. Same with Central and using HandyCare, very close. So, thank you for setting these things up and expanding. And I would like to move that we approve early child inclusive classroom partnership contracts.
Second.
All right, Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, transition service agreement.
Yes, and on this one, and I'm the last one to start pulling up things because of spelling errors or clarifications that way, but in the paragraph, whereas facilities, career connection services, this third paragraph, it has social skins instead of, I'm assuming it's supposed to be social skills. Voting skin of social skins being used. And in the terms of the agreement, we shouldn't be terminating snails within a year thereafter. So I'm assuming that wants to be changed. And also, I just had a question on the benefits for this individual. That will it be covered by the U of I or will it be covered by the district? Since we're paying part of the salary and the U of I is doing the other, who's responsible for the benefits?
I don't have that information, but we can follow that up.
Yeah, I don't think we have this. This was Jane's item, and she wasn't able to be here, so we can come back with that if you need that before approval.
Which, if we had the question in advance, we'd probably have the answer, so. All right, entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the transition services agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
The discussion. Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, Tim Shanahan.
Yeah, and number 8 is a one-day consultant to come in from Illinois on reading and writing, professional development in the district, and for $1,100 an hour, I think we could find somebody from the University of Iowa to provide the same type of professional development. And with the report that we got from people from the University of Iowa, we should avail ourselves at every turn of the resource that we have in our own community. So I urge that we reject this and get a local connection with the University of Iowa Teaching College.
Can I just, maybe Diane's the person to ask, I mean, what led you to select this particular one?
Sure. So this is our Teacher Quality Day that we're planning already for this year, but this will be for next year. And we usually have a keynote presenter. So this year we're having Eric Scheniger coming in to talk about technology and innovation. This would be our keynote for the following year, for 2018. And then in addition to him speaking, we do have over 40 sessions that our teachers opt into. And those are taught by our current staff. They're taught by AEA staff. They are taught by the University of Iowa personnel. They're taught by state consultants. So we bring in a variety of people to offer options for teachers, but we do like to have a keynote, kind of well-known. And we listened to him, a group of the IDS and principals went to listen to Tim at the AEA in June, and very struck by his message and what he can tell our teachers about literacy, and thought he'd be a great person to bring in.
Is he mostly just going to talk, or is he going to work in some kind, it makes it sound like a...
Yeah, he will do both. So he will do a breakout, he'll do a keynote session for the first 90 minutes, and then he will work with you in breakout sessions as well. And what he did at the AEA is he actually had a working session where it was just a question and answer. What are your problems? And then he helps us problem solve those as well.
All right, entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the Tim Shanahan professional development contract.
Second.
Further discussion. Kristen, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, mentoring and induction program.
Yes, this is another professional development that's going to cost us $500 per administrator, and I believe that our superintendent is the one who should be mentoring our staff. If this is something that is in excess, please explain why we need this extra mentoring.
So the School Administrators of Iowa Partnership is one of 3 different opportunities we provide to new administrators in the district. The superintendent and assistant superintendents meet monthly with our new administrators, along with their mentor and mentees. The new administrators are assigned an in-district mentor, so they attend those monthly meetings with us. Then they also attend another scheduled meeting with their mentor individually, so a one-on-one meeting. And then for either new to the district or out of state principals to us, we feel it's important that they're connected to somebody else in Iowa outside of just people in our district. And that's what School Administrators of Iowa helps us do, is to affiliate with another administrator in the state somewhere outside of our system to, like I said, acclimate them and provide that mentoring experience they might not be getting in the district. So we felt that was important as we took on a large number of new administrators, as we had a lot of turnover in the last couple of years, to make sure that we were offering a high level of support to those folks as they came in.
This is one we've done before?
Yes.
Do you get feedback from the administrators?
Yeah, always highly positive that they have that person to go to.
Just as a reminder, we've spoke to this before. We've tried to make a concerted effort to mimic the mentoring requirements for teachers in the state, which is first and second year teachers all have a mentor attached to them. Matt and I have set up our system so second year they don't necessarily have that do not go to SAI, but they continue with their in-district mentor. So we really think it's important to retain our staff. We don't want it to be something that we've missed the boat on, and so we're pretty happy with the mentoring program that we've set up the last year, going into year 2 of that.
All right, entertain a motion.
Move we approve the mentoring and induction program agreement.
Second.
Further discussion? Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, playground hard surface horn.
Yes, on this one, I guess going forward, I've requested that we have the original RFPs accompany these, and I hope we could have that in the future. On the zero entry on this one, have you broken out the cost on what that'll be?
Well, first of all, this is not repair work. This is part of that overall budget, but this is new work for a basketball court that doesn't exist out there. So there was nothing really to show you that needed to be repaired. Secondly, I don't have a breakdown of what that was. I think the alternates would increase the area of the basketball court and increase reinforcement. So I'd have to get that for you. But the zero entry is a result of going back and fixing playgrounds to make them more handicap accessible.
Well, to bring them up to code.
Well, it's not even code. It's just something we're doing to make it right.
Okay, but yeah, if you could provide that for us, that'd be great. Thank you.
Entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the playground hard surface Horn Elementary award of contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ready? Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, playground hard surface southeast.
Yep, on this one, I again request that we be provided with RFPs, photos, and additional information. Thank you.
Yeah, and my response is the same as the last item, but I would add on this particular one that Michelle Cook, the principal out there, requested this additional basketball court for the kids that'll be out in the 10-plex in that part of the building to give them a little break area to go to. So this was a direct request of the principal of the building.
Entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the playground hard surface Southeast Junior High award of contract.
Second.
For discussion, Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, Van Allen softball practice field water supply.
Yes, this is work where we just have, we got one bid. I request we rebid the project and get an additional bid.
Well, I think it's indicative of the workload some of the contractors have this time of year. Carter and Associates has been a good sub, as well as Bockenstead, and they both indicate they just don't have the time to do it. So I have no problem with it. This is not dependent, doesn't need to be done today or tomorrow. So it could be put out for bid again. The problem when you do that is that you expose somebody's bid. Maxwell gave us a bid in good faith. If you take it back out on the street, you expose them, and it becomes unfair to the person that bid the project originally. That'd be my only comment.
All right, entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve the Van Allen softball practice field water supply award contract.
Second.
For discussion, Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion fails with Directors Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Directors Liebig, Hemingway, and Rotland voting nay.
All right, additional playground equipment, Shimmick.
Yes, we had a work session where we were supposed to be making the playground there more accessible and including more structures. I went up to it twice today and looked at the zero entry and how it was being laid out. Some of the questions and concerns that I had about the ability to get around the playground, it doesn't feel like they have been addressed. And getting some reports back from other meetings with parents and people concerning this, I feel we can do better.
So what happens if this one fails?
Well, if this one fails, the equipment isn't completed in time for school. The major pieces are up. This orders the additional items to make it more ADA compliant. The zero entry is there. What's not there yet is the softball. When that goes in, it gives it a much different look, a much different feel. I think that the committee themselves, and you heard from the chairperson tonight, they're pleased with what's there. We did make efforts. Kingsley Botchley worked really hard, as well as I, to make sure that we listened and that we included some additional pieces. I heard one comment today that we added some additional game boards that are all going to be down at the surface level. Well, in fact, what wasn't said is that those are all interchangeable with panels that are currently on the structure itself. And so they're putting in the panels that they have, but when the new ones come, we can opt to change them and put different panels up on the structure and some on the ground. So that was an incomplete statement, a false statement. I think that the zero entry is going to be fabulous out there. I think it's really going to make it accessible. There is one question that came up in the discussion was, can a person in a wheelchair get to the center core of the playground equipment? And yes, the answer to that is yes. I went out there myself today. I was out there a couple days ago and looked at it, and it is accessible. A person in a chair will be able to get to the different pieces that are out there. So I think it's a lack of information, a lack of seeing the finished product in place, but I think it's going great, and I think that the committee will be happy with it.
So this one's time sensitive.
It is time sensitive. If this fails tonight, then you've put the Shimmick Playground completion in jeopardy.
I'm not gonna vote against this because I don't see what's gained by voting this down, but I do hope that this whole experience is a learning experience in terms of going forward, and that we will continue to look at this site.
And that's what,
One just quick question. The ramps are considered part of the play structure, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That is correct.
The one ramp goes directly to the cement. Now, aren't you supposed to maintain a 6-foot soft fall radius around all play structures.
And you will see that, but that ramp starts back about 4 or 5 feet plus from the edge of the concrete ramp. You and I are talking to.
No, I'm talking about the steel ramp, the
Right.
gray steel ramp that on the one structure, and I apologize, I
So
can't
make-
identify, it goes directly, it butts directly with the cement.
And that's the way it's intended to be installed, because this metal ramp comes down to the edge of concrete, the concrete goes back up. But what you have to envision is softball going on top of the concrete. You won't see that concrete.
There's gonna be softball on top
Yes,
of the
and
concrete that is elevated above the zero entry.
The best example I can give you is, think of a wading pool, okay? And if that were filled with water, that water goes up that ramp. But if the wading pool were to lower, or the softball is to get lowered, you still have a concrete ramp, softball, and then the metal ramp. So it's designed that way. It's absolutely the way it should be.
Okay.
Motion.
I move that we approve the additional playground equipment, Shimmick Elementary award of contract.
Second.
Further discussion? Kristen, I'm ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
So I got 2 more.
Phil, I'm not getting yours.
Sorry.
Phil, sorry.
That's all right, thought I clicked on it.
All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, West High School Phase 1 commissioning, HVAC?
Yeah, 16 and, these two can be
Okay.
lumped together as one. Again, this is, there's no mention here that other firms were contacted for the bidding, and I would encourage us, as we mentioned earlier tonight, we raved about having competition and how it saved us money. We do the same thing.
Right. And my response to that, of course, is that it's state law that commissioning be done, so we need to do it. It's a professional service. It's not subject to the same bid requirements or quote requirements that other services are. And experience and consistency across the district is the reason we're suggesting that we continue a System Works, because they've done Twain, Alexander, Liberty, Lucas, Corville, Central, Penn, Weber, and Hoover. And there's some real benefit to having the same engineers look at every one of our buildings and make sure that they're all tuned and balanced the same way, so we have consistency in the district. That's why we didn't go out for other firms. Certainly, if that's your desire, we can do that, but my advice would be to stick with a company that's given us great success.
All right, entertain a motion.
I move we approve items number 10 and number 11 as presented.
Second?
Second.
Is that
For the-
Brian? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
Further discussion? Kristen, I'm ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
All right, custodial supplies.
Chris technically pulled it, so I was in support.
Custodial
Right.
supplies.
Yeah.
I didn't pull the custodial supplies one.
Oh,
Okay, so
okay.
entertain a
Well,
motion.
Yeah, I would like to, we could have saved $14,000 a month and gotten just-in-time delivery on our materials for our schools, but we got the warehouse to do that and everything. And we had a local vendor come up here and express, his interest in this. Why are we going, please explain your rationale for doing this. And
First of all, I apologize. Cold is winning this week. I'll speak as clearly as I can. As part of the RFP, we gave the vendors specific information about our top 35 parts in terms of volume and cost. That amounts to about $340,000 a year based on past quantities. We did share specifications on those 35 parts and the quantity that we had purchased in the previous 12 months. We did not share the cost that we had paid, the price that we had paid for those. So we did receive 7 quotes, 7 complete quotes. The quote from Hilliard, assuming the same quantities as the last 12 months, would amount to a 27% cost savings over previous purchases. EcoCare, which spoke earlier, their pricing would at the same quantities would amount to a 4% cost increase. The range between those two, 31%, is roughly $100,000 over the course of a year. That's really the reason that we made the decision we did.
And we do a lot with Hilliard in our school district.
We've done some business with Hilliard in various areas over the last several years.
Don't they do our gymnasium polishing?
They do our gym floor finish. We have purchased some custodial equipment from them, so we have some experience with their service and their resources in Des Moines.
Okay, and as far as this is for this is locking us in for 3 years?
This is a 3-year contract, yes.
And the prices are fixed, or how?
Prices are fixed for the first year.
For the first year, so we have no idea after that where we are at that point.
Well, that's true. However, we do have language in the RFP that states that they need to provide justification for cost increases as we go from year to year.
Okay.
All right, entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the custodial supplies request for proposals award a contract.
Second.
Further discussion? Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, last but not least, classroom expansion. Ben?
Yeah, so this one just strikes me as something that should receive, at the very least, more of a public input period. You know, the pen capacity this year was already revised upward once from, I think, 587 to 633. This, as I understand it, would add 50 to the 633. And that's a big number for that building. I mean, I know they have a multi-purpose room now, but they're still using the same cafeteria they were using when we said it was 387. And as I understand it, you know, lunch is not, I mean, you know, I'm told that kids are starting lunch at 10:30. I don't know. I hear things, and I don't know if they're accurate. But, I mean, I think that we would need to hear from Penn parents if we're going to have a permanent change to the capacity of that building as part of the facilities master plan. It has an impact, you know, looking out and out and out, and especially if they're going to be at the other end of the RAM, and they might be having, you know, higher than average numbers of students in the rooms. That would just concern me.
Well, a couple of comments. One, ironically, this project is a direct result of the RAM and growth in North Liberty, because we need to move the modular units down to one of the other schools, which created a lack of classrooms. They're still using 2 of the classrooms in the modulars to this day. So by moving one, and there's a concern that the 2nd and 5th grades may need an additional section when school starts. We don't know that until registration, which is a week away. But in order to be ready for school, we needed to get in there and create these additional classrooms. And what we're doing is creating a new preschool room and a new music room in the old gymnasium so that a classroom designated or in that far north wing can be used for an additional section of second grade, and the old music room can be used for an additional section of fifth grade. The other two small classrooms as part of this would be for like ELL or ELP programs, that type thing, which would then totally eliminate the need for any modulars at Penn. The space is there, it's space that's underutilized. So it's reasonable to expect that that school may grow yet again. And the concept that Craig Hansel and I have been kicking around for a while is that we're going to call this an accordion school, and I think this is an appropriate time to talk about it for just a second. But as we add new schools in North Liberty, and if we're fortunate enough again to have the bond and build a new elementary school there starting next year, when that's open in 19, that'll take pressure off of Penn, off of Garner, off of Van Allen, and that school enrollment most likely will drop. Mm-hmm. But North Liberty will continue to grow, and we're going to have to build Grant someday, or even another one in North Liberty, and so we'll need the capacity to grow again. And so it's justifiable because we call it an accordion school. I've used the concept before. And it's a school that will shrink and grow, shrink and grow, shrink and grow until the population is stabilized in that part of town. So for that reason, for the unexpected that we are expecting this fall, and some of the other needs in the district, we felt it was a reasonable thing to do to get these rooms ready. I don't know, Amy, you're looking at me like you want to add to that.
I feel like there are over 600 students right now. We added the ELL program there.
Turn your mic on.
So we're up over 600 students right now currently, and of course we haven't had elementary registration day yet. We did add the ELL programming out there this fall. They have behavior-focused classrooms, other things unique, and as well as preschool out there. So they are an expanding building.
Yeah, but if we say that's a 687 building, that's gonna drive how much additional capacity we think we have to build in the North Corridor. I'm just not convinced it's a 687 student building. And again, bring it back when we hear a little bit more from the people who are affected by it. That'd be my feeling. And when would the work be completed?
Excuse me?
When would the work be completed?
We're trying to get it done before school starts, which is a month away, or less than a month. So we're actually out there doing a little bit of the work with our in-district. We have in-district people working out there as well as some contractors helping us. So
right, and that's my rationale on this one too, is we do it with, if it does need to be done, we do it within district staff.
Well, and historically, Dwayne, the accordion school is a great way to describe it, because when you look back to when Penn was the only elementary school, and it ballooned, then Van Allen opened, then they both ballooned, then Garner opened, and it's ballooned again, or accordioned again, pardon me. So I think it's important to remember that new elementary school is so critical. One and likely two are very critical, but the one is definitely needs to happen with the bond passage. So,
we're looking at the possibility even with the new North Liberty Elementary, there'll be at least 2 more elementary schools in that part of town. Yep. We took with the housing developments and the undeveloped areas yet to be. So it's temporary. It may grow, but it will shrink eventually.
Entertain a motion.
I move we approve number 19 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can I just make a quick comment on this? I'm going to vote yes for this because I don't think we have time to wait, and I've yet to talk to more than a handful of people that don't say we need. Let me change that. Most of the people I talk to in North Liberty tell me I need classroom space, so this is giving them at least 2 more classrooms there.
Further discussion? Kristen, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion fails, with Directors Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Directors Liebig, Hemingway, and Rotland voting nay.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Last agenda item is agenda setting, August 8th.
As you look at the current agenda as it's posted, just 2 changes that are on that draft. One is that our student reps will not be available for us for that meeting, so they are listed on there, but they will not be available until September.
Makes sense.
And then the annual staff climate survey results are in, and we'd be prepared to share those with you at that time.
Annual staff climate, got it. All right, other items?
Well,
I was just going to ask about the staff climate. I mean, this is a time when a lot of people are on vacation. I'm wondering if it would be nice if we waited till school's back in session so they could be a part of that?
Sure, and maybe we could do it twice. The only reason I say that is one of the things we would like to do now that we have that back. We also not only have the district climate information, but we also have it disaggregated by building. We'd like to push that out to our building administrators so that they could share it with their staff as their staff comes back, as they plan for work with their students during the school year. We certainly would prefer to share it with you first before we push it out to the building principals. So perhaps we could take a look at it twice. Or we can push it out to the building principals and come back to you afterwards, your choice.
I don't have a strong feeling about it. I just want to make sure we're respectful to staff, that we don't
Absolutely.
have something when they're gone that they would want to have input on.
Certainly.
So base plans will do it twice, or at least present the information, and then we can decide if you want to take it up in a future meeting. All right,
and as the community member at Community Comments said, I would like to have an update on superintendent PhD program as requested by the public.
and he's provided a written update. I'm happy to pass that along to anybody who requests it.
Just want to clarify, so I wasn't sure if that was for public consumption or not.
I've forwarded it to a couple people, so.
Steve, is it okay for us to
Record.
share that?
Certainly.
Okay.
Well,
I just
questions
wasn't
is-
sure.
Yeah, I forwarded it to a couple people, so if people have questions of Steve, I'd suggest you contact him directly.
Well, I've got an email that's been in since July 5th. I haven't gotten any responses to.
Yep, and Steve has an email into you since January asking for a meeting, so 6 months later, I'd suggest you meet with him.
Well, I think if it's something
We'll check that
that's-
out. We'll
that's-
get the date on the
that's for
January
public, we can
email.
do it in public.
Yeah, happy to answer. If anybody forwards me questions, Steve questions, we'll get them answered. You guys need to meet. I think you should get that done. Anything else on the 8th? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? This meeting's adjourned.